participants.
Yeah.
I'll show you the answers.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for your patience, and welcome to the April 28th meeting, which is delayed, I think, by a couple of weeks, of the Northport Village Corporation. I'm John Spitz, the president of the corporation. We not only have a very full agenda today, we also have a 2 o'clock workshop for the overseers. It's a public workshop that's happening with various procedural issues, and we'll have that again at 2. We clearly have people from the village who have things they want to talk about, all of which is to say that I would love this to be as efficient and expedited meeting as possible. And so there are issues that people feel passionately about or feel that they need to expostulate on at great length. Please don't. Let's try and keep, because we have a lot of topics to move through. It's the beginning of our heavy part of the year, and I'm just bearing in mind that this group is going to be reassembling at 2 o'clock, so I don't want to exhaust them all before we get to that point. With that in mind, can I have a motion to approve the minutes of the March meeting?
So moved.
Seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? That was unanimous. Are there any Bayside residents who have, or meeting attendees, issues they'd like to address? Please stand up and identify yourself. Why don't you move over to the camera to take that call.
Bill Cressy, Bayside Arts. I just have 3 items that I believe would probably require some kind of motion. We have our summer schedule ready, and we're going to have 6 events upstairs, 5 of which require tickets. We would expect to pay 2 hours rental, if that's okay with everyone, on behalf of each of those events. And the 6th one does not require a ticket, but we'll have voluntary donations. We would again request a waiver for that one if the overseers are willing to grant us that. We have 6 or 7 children's art classes in this room, which are free, which again we would request a waiver for that, if it's agreeable to everyone. The second item, I will give you a schedule afterwards, so you have the schedule this summer. As contemplated earlier and discussed a couple of times in this room and a couple of times
Bill,
with the infrastructure.
actually, there was just a request that we actually vote per item.
Sure,
rather
fine.
than go with 12. So your first issue is regarding the summer schedule.
I move that the schedule be approved with the understanding that those for which charges are being made, Bayside are to pay the customary rental fee, and they process the customary paperwork in connection with those items.
Could I ask for a clarification? We've already filled out the paperwork. The reservations in some cases extend to more than the 2 hours of the performance. It's only the performance that requires a ticket. We would request that we be allowed to pay the 2 hours rental as opposed to setup time. Anybody who wants to come in and watch us set up is welcome. There's no ticket required.
And maybe they might help.
Well, you never can tell. That would be the risk they would run.
Well, I would suggest we grant that as a one-season thing to be,
Fine,
considered
yeah,
each
we're happy to
season.
come
And
every year.
that's,
So I'm sorry, what's the original motion?
The motion was to approve the schedule and that they pay in accordance with the, for the ticketed items in accordance with the reservation. We need a second, and then we can discuss any
I was
clarification.
going to say, so second by Lee, discussion or clarification.
clarification is he wants to pay for the 2 hours
2
of
hours
the
of
performance and waive the setup and tear down part. And I'm fine with that. Anybody else has a thought?
Mike?
I mean, the other side of it, and I don't want to belabor every point here, but the other side of it is that obviously if we have the thing being used for, it can't be used for something else during that time, so how do we consider that? It's just a discussion.
My suggestion is we grant it this year, and if we get so overwhelmed with requests for community hall space that they need to pay for that hour of setup beforehand, then we'll reconsider that next year.
Fair enough. That makes sense.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to approve the summer schedule with the waivers and payments for the actual use? It's unanimous, thank you. Keep going.
Second one is, as discussed previously and discussed with the infrastructure committee, we have an add-on to the electric job that's been done. We will pay for it, obviously. We would like to install 8 new circuit breakers, 20 amps each, and 8 new outlets, one going from each of the circuit breakers. They will be in the same places that outlets traditionally are, along the walls. A couple of them may be on the two lights on the stage, but those are the only two that would be in any place other than where you're used to seeing them.
I'd like to make a motion that we allow them to do that. We looked at it.
I have a question, this will be done by a licensed electrician?
But it will be done by the same electrician who did the previous job.
So the motion is
To allow Bayside Arts to arrange for that through Billy to have that installed.
Second.
any discussion?
Just, this is what you mentioned in your infrastructure report on your Bayside Arts meeting, and you've approved this.
Yes, the electrical part,
Just
definitely.
wanted to get.
It's, and actually, it's better than what they originally intended, because they were talking about
Yeah.
220, and now they're talking about 110 regular outlets, so that everybody can use them.
I was able to get some pretty decent equipment that
Right.
enables me to do it.
So it's actually better than what we
20
thought.
amp
Got it.
outlets.
Thank you.
Steve?
Yeah, just for clarification, is the village paying for this? and
No, we're
reimbursed
paying
by
for that.
Bayside Arts?
All Bayside Arts.
We pay for anything we
Bill
have.
goes, you're saying Bill goes to Bayside Arts, right?
Yes.
Billy,
Billy has a question.
Bill?
just one question that we didn't discuss the other day, is there anything gonna be up above the stage high, hanging in or the lights up above? or anything?
There may be, but we're not getting to where the lights are gonna be yet, just where the outlets are gonna be.
Well, I just wanted to know where the outlets were gonna be
So
suspended.
the outlets, there will be two on those posts to the right and the left of the front of the stage. I'll keep them as low as possible.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Thank you, it's unanimous. Keep going, Bill.
Third item is, we'd like to build 2, maybe 3 doors on the front of the stage. Billy and Mike and I looked at it together at the infrastructure committee, and I just had Brock upstairs looking at it as well. The doors will be the same material that's there now. And if you want to see what that looks like, you can look at the one on the side. That's what they did there. They cut off what was there, they put hinges and knob on it, and it becomes a door. We will use either dark brown hinges, or if we can get them, some antique hinges, we will use dark brown knobs. And I don't think it'll be very visible. Brock and I just looked at the design. It'll have to clear the front of the stage thing, but it doesn't look like a very big deal. We'd like approval. Obviously, we're going to pay for that work. At the same time, we are able to, I think, put in some 2x4s to reinforce the stage a little bit so it's less spongy. If that's just putting in a few 2x4s, we'll pay for that as well. If it gets into something more intense, I'll come back to you.
A motion here?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that they be allowed to do this. I would like to make a motion that it does have the antique hinges, so you can get them on Trash and Treasures in a bunch of different places. I'd also like to see no knobs on the front, have the kind that you can push and they open, because that's where everybody looks at it. So
I mean, I'll do that if I can. Can you make that if possible?
it's possible, so, yes.
Second?
No, I have a question.
There's
Okay, I'll second it so we can.
Seconded.
Well, I haven't finished yet.
Oh, this is the motion?
Yeah, it's still the motion, but it's also contingent upon them coming up with a plan to remove the panels and install something that they can move up and down and is consistent with the wood that's in the structure today. Because I don't think any of this work should be done until that all has sort of been figured out.
We're doing,
Well, Mike, I mean, I am in the process of working out something with regard to those set panels. I would like to get this door done, because that's where I want to put the set panels. You're not going to see those things go away anytime until I get these doors approved.
I need a second
I'll
first.
second the motion so we can discuss it.
Yeah, we can take that out.
Well, it's your motion. What do you want the motion to say?
I want it in there for the discussion, and then we can pull it out.
All right. Further discussion? Lee?
I've got a question. You say you want to use 2x4s underneath the stage to help hold it up. It's been my experience 2x4s are not adequate for doing something like that, because 2x4s aren't really 2x4s, they're 2x3s, or 1 something by 3. You're going to probably have to go to 2x6s, which aren't going to be 2x6s, they're going to be 2x.
If I may
something
clarify
by
that,
5.
we will use whatever, these are things that will go on top of the existing supports, between the existing supports. The existing supports are like 4x4s. I mean, or maybe more than 4x4. I don't know what they are. They're huge. Those supports are not going anywhere. It's just that between the support and the stage, there's a gap. And the gap causes it to be spongy. We just want to slide some things in there. And the width of those beams will depend on what the space is. Whatever the space is, that's what the width of the beam is going to be. I just said 2x4s.
Further discussion?
It may not be.
Do you have somebody who's doing
I
this
think
work?
the 2x6s.
2x6s, yeah.
This is the stage.
These are the sort of conversation I'd rather not delve into during this meeting.
Do you have somebody who's going to do this?
I don't have the person yet.
Okay, and who's going to bear the cost of this?
We're going to pay for it, and we will also pay for the supports if it doesn't get too expensive. If it gets expensive, I'll come back and ask.
Okay.
Judy?
I don't like the qualification on the motion with regard to being contingent upon a plan on the screen. We've made very clear that we want that set screen gone. On the other hand, we've also heard many, many times about storage underneath that stage is a useful thing for all of us. So I don't like the coupling of those. I will vote for the motion as long as it's not coupled with that.
Would you like to amend the motion?
I would like to amend the motion and pull that out for now, and we can talk about that at a later date.
So the motion is then to approve the request that Bayside Arts pay for doors and
Possibly
supporting,
support.
possible support of the stage if necessary. Any further discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank
And
you.
I just want to say thank you all very much for those three. And I am working on a plan to get this set out of sight. And Bill, Paige, and Mike gave me some good ideas. I don't want to go into that now, but I should have a more detailed plan for you at the meeting.
Thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate it. Anyone else, please?
Beverly Crowfoot. I'm working with the Drinkwater School on their production, Northport the Musical, which will take place on May 16th at the Drinkwater School. They initially hoped to live stream to the community hall, but for various reasons, that's not going to be possible. They would, however, like to borrow chairs for the 16th so that the parents, grandparents, and friends can sit down to enjoy the production. And I would ask you to waive the cost of that loan. In addition, the 8th graders hope that before the end of school, that is, say after June 10th, they can have a presentation of the video of the performance as well as show some of the projects that they've done.
What time is the presentation?
I believe it's 6 o'clock on May 16th, and I don't know if those of us who don't have children in the school will be allowed in the doors because of seating capacity and space.
Would it be possible to get the Bayside Arts to make a showing of that tape?
Well, that was the hope that the Historical Society would do that in the summertime.
May we have a motion, please?
I move that we, assuming that the proper paperwork is filled in for the loan of the chairs, that we waive the rental fee for the chairs for this performance on May 16th.
Second.
Discussion?
How many chairs was it that you wanted?
As many as there are.
Bill, how many
Should be
chairs?
100.
100 chairs?
Yeah, they'll be transporting them using that white van that you see in the parking lot when you drive past the school.
I'd like a black van, please.
Any further discussion?
Well, and they understand that they need to be returned by the next day. They understand, all that is understood that they need to be returned. Okay.
I hope to be here to do that.
I was just going to say, there'll be someone in this building who'll be able to arrange the coming and going of the chairs.
I plan to be around, and I have a key to get into
Thank
the
you.
building because of the room here.
Very nice. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Thank you. Anyone else with questions? Please, sir.
Good morning. I'm Fred Lincoln. For those who don't know me, my cottage is located about halfway between Murphy Square and the Huntoon Cottage along the shoreline. So like many cottages on the shore, my seawalls sustain considerable damage. So I have a contract with Farley and Sons out of Rockport, who are fully indemnified to do the repair work. We're currently planning to have that done after Labor Day. And the reason I'm here this morning is to ask the village's permission, because of the access at my property, I'm not able to go directly from my property to the beach, so they're going to be using a barge to come in, and I would like to use the ramp by the wharf for the access of loading the equipment onto the barge at high tide and then bringing it over to my property. The contract I have with Farley and Sons completely includes any damage that might be done to the beach would be repaired after completion. And I know there's that area of the shoreline the village is looking at having done too. So I was hoping if the overseers would give me permission, that would all be done prior to when we decide to go forward with that. So, that's
Motion
it.
to approve?
I move that we extend to Fred Lincoln the permission to use the boat ramp for this private repair on the same terms and conditions that we have extended to other persons, namely that certificate of insurance be provided to us, that Freddie sign an indemnification agreement with regard to any damage, and I think that's the only conditions, right? Yeah.
Second.
So we'll get that form that we need you to sign to you
Okay.
if this is approved.
Okay.
Seconded by Lee. Discussion?
That includes the village being named in the insurance certificate. Okay, great. Yeah, that's it.
Hearing none, all in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else here? Please.
Yeah, Doug Poslow for Linda Poslow. She lives at 9 Main Street, and we're doing a pretty big job on her cottage there. We have an approved permit from the town of Northport, and we're moving the house down 3 feet to get 6 feet on the side, and I guess somebody voiced concerns about the setback from the street. We had to go back even further, and we're just here to see what that's all about. Someone wrote a letter to 2B, and
I was informed that there was going to be someone's going to speak about the issue. I don't know particularly what the question is.
I didn't know if that's what this was the time for.
Actually, may I speak?
Please.
As I understand it, Tupi's in charge of issuing permits. There is a setback requirement from the front line as well as the rear line and the side lines. As I understand it, there's no issues with any sideline setbacks.
Yeah, we
But-
resolved that.
But as I understand it, someone has expressed a concern about where the sideline on the road is.
Yeah,
Because the road is owned by the village, it's not a right-of-way, so the front setback has to be from the side of the road, so your corner of your property. So many of our properties actually sit in the right-of-way of the road.
All of them do.
Yeah, so I don't know where
Mine
yours
is the least offensive.
Right,
of
yours
all
is
the
setback.
violations
we're
are
we're
all
11
Bayside.
feet,
Yeah, that's right.
11 feet on one side and 9 feet on the other from the road.
Right, so the question would be to go to 2B, I don't know where your survey, I know you have a very good survey,
Yeah.
where your survey would put the sideline of the road. So just as long as you honor the setbacks of the sideline of the road, or you keep it no closer to the road than it currently is. If I were 2B, I would say, well, then you've done what you're supposed to do. So it's 2B who has to answer your questions. But it's whether or not she's measuring from the middle of the road, which would be wrong, or from the side of the road for your front setback. But because you have a grandfathered space, 11, then you should be, my view, allowed to keep your grandfathered space.
Okay.
But
I'm the fourth generation,
Yeah.
and ours the fifth.
Right,
We
right.
have a vested interest
Oh,
in
no,
this
I
community.
agree with you. Yeah. I'm actually the one who wrote the email to
I know.
All right, so
Yeah,
in
the
full-
village.
in full disclosure,
Yeah.
okay, it's a small village,
Yeah.
everybody knows.
Yeah.
And I didn't do it because I don't agree with what you're doing. I did it because the way the ordinance is written, it's supposed to be pushed back, all right? And that's the way that you're supposed to pull it back to the most practical extent possible. I think we need to get into a little bit of the new zoning regs and how the Board of Appeals works before we could really act on this, because it was my understanding that when we revised the ordinance, that we were correcting some of the issues associated with that. And one of them that I think the town still has is this Board of Appeals thing that we don't necessarily have the right to have our own Board of Appeals. So the Board of Appeals is them. So I think that what Tupi explained to me was that the way the process is that you just apply to the Board of Appeals and then they'll have a hearing. And I asked her about the timeline, and I said, you know, obviously you want to get started very quickly. And I said, how quickly can you do this? And they said, in the next, they could do it in the next week or two, is what you think they could actually have the meeting. I am not in opposition of you keeping it in line. I think that's within the historical
Gotta
nature of
ruin
the
the
building.
look.
Yeah, you look down the street.
This is
I don't-
clearly a town of Northport issue.
No, it's not.
Well, I believe it is in terms of the code enforcement officer
That's
having
the
jurisdiction
permits.
immediately over this, not the Northport Village Corporation.
Well,
So if someone is challenging a permit that has already been issued, then they would have to challenge that through the town.
Through the town.
Yes, I understand that, but the reason why they're here today is because Tupi said, come to this meeting
Yes.
and ask for a letter from us. And I said that, it can't be the procedure. We can't be the ones deciding whether we're gonna grant or waive it.
Nobody
That's the
said it was
town.
Yeah,
That's what
she
Tupi
said.
told us.
So
I
Tupi
wish-
told you to do that. I talked to her about it, I said that.
Because
that's what
she said it was fine if we left it where it was on the front, as long as it was okay with you guys, so.
And that's where.
Fine with her if it's fine with you.
I wish they did that, but, okay.
And we do want to twist it just a little bit because it's kind of cockeyed to the street, so we wanted to straighten it up so when you look down the row, it looks like a row, like it was originally, you know, it's moved over the years, so. I mean, we're trying to improve it, we're not trying
Yeah,
to
right.
reinvent the wheel or anything, we're
No,
just,
I
you know.
understand.
Would it be okay if, has Tupi put in writing that she wants something from us in writing?
Yes.
Would you
She didn't
mind,
put it in writing, she told me verbally that
Okay.
she would like something.
before we could chime in, and we, the village, are the direct abutters because we own the street. Now, we have not chimed in yet, someone across the street has chimed in, Mr. Lannon. But before we could chime in, we'd want to know what you've said about cockeyed and honoring it and all that. We'd need to see that before we could say, oh yeah, we get that, you're not planning on moving it any closer to the street, you're not planning on violating the setback. We'd need to see it before we could write that letter that Tupi's saying she'd like to have.
Right, and then she's gonna take, I think she's gonna arrange for the Board of Appeals to formally then allow this to occur. And I will write a letter in support too, because I don't want to see what I would consider the broken tooth syndrome, where we have a row of cottages, then we have one broken tooth sitting.
My whole problem with this is that, you know, we're gonna be the trial case for this whole new format now, so our project has to be slowed down slightly.
I
Because, you know, there's been houses in the past, just last summer, that were built 3 feet from the road, you know, on Griffin Street, a brand new house, torn down, rebuilt, way closer than we're gonna be, so I don't see why she should have to suffer, you know, the new process that's gonna be set up, that's all.
Mr. Presto, I don't think that anyone has suggested a new process. I think that under the zoning ordinance, the building has to have a setback from the sideline of the road. We have no problem with that if it's honored. We have no problem with you grandfathering the existing setback. Lord knows we all benefit from Linda's flowers in their front yard, so we want those. So, but we can't be put in a position of where I'm sitting right here is hearing Mr. Lannon's point of view and your point of view, and you're asking us to react at the request of the board of the code enforcement officer, whose job it is. We haven't seen the pieces of paper.
Okay.
We need to see the pieces of paper and say, yeah, that's how we understand it to be, or that's not how we understand it to be. But right now, we're very much in the middle of two people telling us what the pieces of paper say. What Mike Lannon is saying as to the Board of
I don't
Appeals is different.
No, I don't think so.
Is different from what the current ordinance already has a Board of Appeals process in place. We're not talking about a new set of rules.
No,
We haven't changed any of that, and the voters would have to change something like that first. We're talking about the existing process.
Lee?
I think there's a misunderstanding that the people think they're going to be held up by these proposed new existing zoning ordinances that we've probably would be voted on till the annual meeting. And therefore, you guys are gonna be basically governed by what we have in place now, not what's proposed in a later period of time.
I mean, I understand where he's coming from. There needs to be a process, so people can't just build their house right next to the road, you know?
Yeah.
And it makes sense, totally, but, I mean, if you need to see the piece of paper that says the house has been there for 100 years, and we're gonna put it back where it's been,
Then that's what, then,
It would help also for us to have some formal communication from the Town of Northport Code Enforcement Officer that says, could you please provide us with X? We have a process here where we've got to track everything, and for someone to walk in and say, as I believe you, but they want something, I need something, we need something a little more formal than that.
Okay.
And I would love to, the next meeting of this group is scheduled to be only 2 weeks from now, so it's not a long time. So there's plenty of time in 2 weeks to assemble whatever material needs to be assembled, so that this Board of Overseers can vote if needed on it.
okay.
So
So
I just need
you're
to-
just looking for
the
some-
copy of the existing permit, with the existing drawing, to confirm that what your setback that you're proposing, if it's the same setback you have today, in other words, you're not moving it closer to the road,
Yeah,
then that's grandfathered. If it's,
That's what we're doing.
if it's going closer to the road, that's not grandfathered.
yeah, I
That would be a
gotcha.
problem
I
for us.
gotcha.
If it's going further away from the road, that would trigger the setback issues because you'd be moving it and you'd be creating a new nonconformity. We just need to see that.
So you're saying that by moving it down the 3 feet to get the 6-foot separation?
I don't think it's the laterals you're worried about. I think it's
By
the
doing
front
that-
and back.
By doing that, we're non-conforming to go back to where it was. So it's kind of a contradictory between the two things.
We have
If
to,
we're allowed to move it down the hill in one way, and then you're saying that we have to move it back 6 feet the other way. So
you'd be allowed to move it down the hill as long as you preserve the 6 feet.
Folks, it's 9:30. This is the sort of thing I don't want to get involved in. I believe, as I said, this is a Town of Northport issue for the moment. We will wait for information from the Town of Northport through you. Sorry to take that tone, but this is the sort of thing that I don't want to get involved in back and forth on. Okay? Thank you. Is there anyone else who has a question or from the...
I just have one other question.
Please.
Troopy told me to ask you this too. We're thinking about putting a natural gas tank underground, because they do that now, and they've been doing it for years.
Mhm.
Is that anything you guys would have a problem with? Because she said it's not an issue in the state of Maine.
I'll look to the village agent.
I don't think it is, because the village has one underground.
Seems fine.
Just
so you know,
it's
So-
Dig safe, as they say.
Yeah. I just want to talk to you when you
Yeah.
get a chance later on.
Let's-
Tomorrow.
let's talk later.
I understand where you're coming from.
Anything else from people here?
So let's do it today. I'll come by here. Each chapter.
Okay.
So I think we.
Time for the report of the president. I had a note to
Yeah, sure.
catch up on Bayside Arts, but thank you, Bill, you covered that off.
Yes.
A note, a reminder, again, as I've said before, that July 1st, which is just around the corner, is when, is the due date for reports by committee chairs for the annual report. And May, June, July. So May and June, really, that's 2 months essentially in front of you. 60 days plus, should be plenty of time. It's about 1 page or so. Take a look at past annual reports if you've never done one before. I had noted last, in an email, I believe, somewhere around last month, that unfortunately, family situation has arisen such that I can't be here on May 12th, which is our next scheduled meeting of the Board of Overseers. 2 options. If my presence is deemed to be so critical, we could move that meeting, or I prefer it stay on the 12th, and Vicki, could you handle the duties of running it? Yes.
I can't make the 12th.
I can't make the 12th.
Well, can the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people here make the 12th? Dick? Lee, we don't know. Well, we know we have 4 people here, which is a quorum.
That's enough.
Is it the interest of the board to keep it at 12 then, or do you want to?
I can join by phone, but
Okay.
I'm okay with 19.
Steve?
Well, you're not going to be here, right, Mike? That's when the infrastructure committee is supposed to present their budget. And we do not have much time. So if you wish to keep the budget cranking along and not have an extraordinarily long Saturday meeting, then I would think you might want to take a look at moving.
The 5th or the 19th. 5th is next week.
Yeah,
That is too soon, I think.
19th.
And I'm not here the 19th, so.
I could work with Bill to get something before that meeting still. It can be approved here. I mean, Doc's on the committee too, and Dick will be here. So is Lee. But he's not, we're not sure he's.
I
So-
can be here the 5th.
No,
The 5th is too soon, I think.
Oh.
5th is next week.
What, could you have material that could be sent out in advance so that the overseers could look at it
Yes,
before that meeting?
yes, we can do it that way. Definitely to keep the meeting moving along, or we can switch it to the 19th, and I can make the 19th.
I would,
Either way.
given the issues with the 19th that have arisen, I think I recommend that, which is to send material out in advance for the overseers to review,
Okay.
such that, and Dick would be here to answer any questions and be able to take a vote on the 12th. Is it a vote will need to be taken on the 12th?
This is really just getting that information into the budget
Yeah.
and having discussion instead of taking that entire budget, presenting to the overseers on a Saturday and saying, now we're going to go through every single line in this budget. Because you'll be here for 8 hours if that's the approach we take.
We don't want to do that. We want to look at
We
it
don't-
on our own when we have time, on our couch.
Got it.
No, exactly.
Okay, does that seem like it might make sense? Workable? What I just suggested?
Yeah, that sounds fine.
So we're keeping the meeting on
Keep
the
it
12th.
Keep it on the
And
12th.
there'll only be 4 of us here.
Well, maybe five.
Maybe 5 and Mike.
Mike calling now.
And Steve will be here.
Yes, Steve will be here. Okay,
Okay, so we're keeping
thank
the-
you.
But are we still having meetings at 9? When do we switch to 8?
June.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you very much, Vicki.
So when is that meeting?
The 12th.
Mother's Day.
Mother's Day.
Come celebrate with
In
us.
this, there's lots of bad days, right. Never works, it seems. Report of the treasurer?
Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So you'll recall at our last meeting that because this meeting was delayed, we approved paying all of our bills. We still have warrants to sign, so the checks have all gone out, but the invoices are in there, so that's part of your normal process. I apologize for getting financials to you so late. They're in front of you this morning. There's nothing of great import you need to think about. I've had some issues with formatting. Typically, we present this in a landscape format, which makes the numbers big enough so you can see them, and have not been able to do that, but nonetheless, you have a copy of the report. I'll continue to try to get it cleaned up and get it to you electronically. But at any rate, the part that you would want to know about would be we have a contingency fund of $19,000. We only have remaining $9,000. We set aside with the overseer's approval $5,000 for operating variances. And so far, we've consumed about $2,000 of that $5,000 contingency. That is very unusual. There's about $500 on the village agent line. There's about $500 on workers' compensation. There's about $500,000 in the police budget so far.
Not 500,000.
$500. And another,
You got very excited over there.
and another 500 or so. So we're chewing through that relatively quickly, and I'm not seeing offsetting savings on many other budget lines. So just kind of an FYI. There are $5,000 also approved for additional police funding as voted at the last meeting. So that's basically where we are financially. Other than that, things are tracking as pretty much as expected. A couple of new business things. The first one is that I have been informed that the utility plans to remove the George Street fire hydrant this year. That was never presented to the overseers, and there were no funds in the budget. So that cost is $1,500 if you wish to do that this year. And I don't know, Judy, you want to chip in on behalf of
Well,
the utilities?
I don't, because when you saw that dialogue, I was waiting for Dick to chime in, and then I never looked at it. I don't know, I was hoping Billy would be able to tell us what that's about.
Well, when we started the new fire hydrant process, putting in new fire hydrants, the talk was when we put in a new hydrant, we take out one of the pond hydrants.
Right.
Okay, then during that discussion, at one of the other meetings in the overseers, it got skewed sideways, and they just talked about putting in another hydrant. So they wanted to get 2 hydrants in 1 year. But the plan of the utilities department was, while the EJP, the people who install the hydrants, was here with their truck and their personnel and their training, that we would decommission at the same time a hydrant so they could do that. And we had the excavator here, which would save money in the long run. If they have to come in separately, then of course that $1,500 or whatever would be higher. That was the way the utilities, you know, Dick and was going. So we got all messed up. Okay, and then of course Dick doesn't know what goes on here most of the time. And he got all of it. So it was just confusion.
Okay, because what you've just reported is what I think the utilities trustees expected, and so I was surprised by the question.
Steve?
So I have a slightly different recollection. The proposal for 2018 was to install 2 hydrants and remove 1 hydrant. We did remove a hydrant.
That was the confusion.
And we did install 1, but utilities made a determination not to install the second one. Much as a surprise to the overseers. We did not know that was going to happen. So in our budget are funds to support the rental of 2 hydrants. So if the utilities chose to put in one of the new hydrants this year, the money is already in the budget to cover that expense.
Right.
However, there's never been a discussion that I'm aware of removing the George Street hydrant.
But there was,
Not in this group.
in the beginning.
So, at any rate, that's where we are. Just, I guess the question really is, what do the overseers wish to do? Because it's a $1,500 bill coming out of your remaining $9,000 in contingency.
Vicki?
Is there a problem with just leaving it there for the time being?
I don't see a problem with it, but it was to save money, but it can be taken out at a later date.
Right, because it was, well,
I know.
wasn't there concern about having it there because of the cross-contamination? Is that a
But there
different one we're
should be
talking
no
about?
cross-contamination there,
Okay.
because there's no new hydrant there.
And how are we saving money if we're doing it at a different time from when we installed the other one in any event? Because I thought that
The
is,
excavator coming in.
Because the excavator's gonna be already be there.
but
Yeah, the excavator will already be there.
for the one that we're just putting in.
Right.
Got it. Jeffrey?
Well, I was gonna ask you, does it really make any difference, if we're concerned about the money, does it really make any difference if we just push to your point, into the next budget?
It'll be next year. It'll be a higher amount of money.
It would be a higher amount of money because of the excavator, but in my experience, we got excavators around here all the time. You know, every year there's somebody's coming in digging up some, you
Yeah,
know.
but you don't have a qualified excavator to work around stuff.
With a hydrant.
So what's the
this
price?
is the
What
hydrant
would
issue.
the price difference be?
I couldn't
You
tell
know,
that.
okay.
What's the will of the overseers?
Well, we could leave it there for perpetuity.
Plant flowers and
Yeah.
It's not a cross-contamination cost, like Dick's said. So
So we could leave it
I don't
there.
want to make utilities decisions, but
where
you
where
could
is
leave
this
it there
located?
and just put the other one in.
Steve?
This past winter, correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, we had our new hydrant freeze up, and the only functional hydrant in the village was the George Street hydrant.
There's a piece of
C
it.
Street, George Street, that-
Yeah,
but that, we
You know,
don't. we don't do that.
yeah,
One of our past discussions has been, that was the one functional hydrant out of the 3 hydrant system that's fed from the fire pond.
Right.
So I just wonder why we're taking it out in the first place. It provides additional fire protection for
We're
the
not
village.
taking out C Street.
There's no cost.
We're not taking C Street and George Street out.
Mike?
we're talking about taking out the one with low pressure, leaving in the one with high
The
pressure.
one that has no pressure in Griffin.
That was taken out last year.
No, the Alpha Griffin Street. There's an Alpha Griffin.
I understand.
This is the one, yeah.
We're planning on leaving the C Street one in.
So is it still functional,
Which one?
the one that we're gonna leave in place?
The one that,
George Street.
the Upper Griffin Street hydrant is not, it can be used, but it's really not functional for firefighting.
So we should make a decision then whether we take it out of, abandon it in place, or we continue to use it, or we remove it. Those are the 3 options. So what are we gonna do?
I vote for all 3.
I'm really confused now. I thought we were talking about a George Street hydrant that we were taking out.
No.
Isn't that how this?
Oh.
I'm.
That's
So
where the
let's
conversation
the
started.
one we're not talking.
I'm not crazy.
It's been my experience that if you have a little backup, like that one from the fire pond,
probably ought to keep it, even if the pressure isn't quite what you want. If all the other ones fail or freeze, you get a backup. So leave it.
I would be in favor of leaving it just because of the status of the profound confusion around this table. I would like to see, I would like to see in writing, and I don't think this is anyone at this table's responsibility, I think it's Dick McElhaney's. What are we talking about? What is the cost doing it today? What is the cost doing it next year? What does it cost doing it, which one is it? What service does it presently provide? What do we get from keeping it there? I'd like to see that. I'd like the utilities trustees to opine on it first, and then report back.
And just to add to that, I'd like them to make a determination whether they consider the pressure to be reasonable or not. Because if it's not, it should be marked that way so that people know that that's not the first choice to go to. That's all I'm asking, because we don't, in a fire, the
And
time,
we have had those PSI tests for that.
Yeah.
That's how we know it's worthy of abandoning.
When were they planning on putting in the new one? Is there a
Sometime
schedule?
this spring, as soon as I get time to do it.
Okay,
And I
the
don't
only
know
thing I would say, let us table this for this season.
Right.
Okay, so that they can go ahead and put the other one in, would make it,
Well, there's a possibility we could decide that it could be taken out May 19th.
right,
To get the information.
and then we can pay it next year.
Is
January.
somebody, Bill,
No,
are
we
you,
can't. No, we can't.
No?
who is conveying this information to Mr. McElhenney?
I will, Bill will.
I have this here.
Understood the information that you're conveying? You know what you're, we don't know, I don't think we have to take a vote on this, we're just,
Yeah, I
okay. Anything else, Bill? Or, I'm sorry, Steve, I found so.
So the only other piece is that Billy's currently working on a proposal to replace the village truck. So we have money set aside for that purpose. There's about $12,000 in the village fund. Utilities have about $6,000 in their accrual fund. And Billy will get back to us coming along. That's nothing that needs to be done this year, but probably needs to be done next year.
How many miles on the truck?
I'm sorry?
How many miles on the truck?
It's not so much the miles, the body is shot. Salt and sand. We don't even talk with Billy afterwards. But anyway, I intend to put that into the budget as a proposal for next year.
So we've never fluid filled underneath of that truck?
The bed of the truck is gone. The inside, where the sander sits, and that salt sits, all into it. It's all rusted out. Fender wells are rusting out. It's starting to deteriorate. As you all know, in the state of Maine, a brand new car
Oh, I know.
starts to rust out the minute you drive it. The salt's killing it. It's still dry, it still runs good and everything.
So offline, you should have a discussion with Billy because he's got some pretty good ideas. And that's all I have. Thanks, John.
Thank you. Any questions for Steve? Hearing none. Bill, it's your turn. And by the way, I want to say that I know that there's issues probably that I'm unaware of, but the roads look great considering the havoc that we've been dealing with this winter and spring. Just driving around, the roads are really good. I mean, I from going down Griffin and all that, it was very impressed. So thank you very much.
I did have the bulldozer in a couple times this winter, because the roads washing up and stuff, so that helped us make it look better. There's still areas that need to get fixed. We've still got some gravel on top of them to get them up so they don't wash out continuously. We've got some ditch work we gotta do. I haven't been able to, where we're having such a crappy spring, I really haven't been able to get contractor in to go over that stuff yet, to come up with some figures and ideas and what, prioritize things yet. So, back to,
It's your report.
okay. As you know, we went out for the estimate for the cleaning of the community hall, the one-time cleaning of the year upstairs. The estimate come back around $1,300. I says I didn't think so. With moaning and groaning and trying to figure out, how we could get somebody to do that and not have to have the insurance and the predetermination papers and all that stuff. All of a sudden Mandy says, well, I do that kind of thing, I'll do that for $250. And I said, well, that sounds about right. For what is on the list to be done. So then my next dilemma was, now how do we get her to do that? Yes, she is an employee. Yes, she does pay there's a three-way split thing between the utilities and the village to clean downstairs if she pays for it. But I didn't want this to run into that, you know, to skew that line up. So I had to make some phone calls, or emails. I got a hold of Steve and I got a hold of John, and we figured it out that Mandy could do it at her $15 an hour rate. And, you know, so she supposedly has everything done up there except for the floor and some window work left to do. And she'll be within that $250.
Thank you.
Thank you, good job.
So that's how we got
Thank
around
you.
that.
So it's clean?
Well, it's
Pretty much.
surely.
Yes,
The
say yes,
She's got
yes.
the floor and that. And yes, she did scrub out that refrigerator that was pretty gross. It's working. It doesn't seem to have any smell to it that I can tell. So I guess she's gonna start watching after each performance and stuff now, watching that kind of thing when she does her inspection.
I think there's a thing in there, they're asked if they need the kitchen. If they don't need the kitchen, the room is locked.
Yeah,
And
well-
so whenever it's locked, okay.
Yeah, problem is,
We'll leave
the
it.
arts has a key to it, so it's always open and closed, so you don't know who's in there.
All right, Judy?
We made, Amy and I made those little signs all over about the rules of use. I think it would make sense for me to post something on the refrigerator
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
That reminds people I've got something around over for that.
Thank you.
So, let's see, the other issue that I find in, and I think I brought this up maybe last year or before when we were discussing different things upstairs at the community hall. Out back of our community hall is a lot of water. And the issue that I always was worried about is it's gonna start to affect our foundation. It has. It's coming in the wall in our storage closet. The floor in there was wet, some of the boxes got wet. We need to get a drain put along the back edge of the community hall to drain the groundwater out, because it's all setting over this left-hand back corner. I haven't had a chance to get anybody to look at it, to get a price or anything, but it's starting to get into the building now. I just wanted to bring that to your attention at this point. I'll see if I can get a price to get, perforated drain in there, because now that we own the land up there, we just drain it off to that corner.
And I'm not too close, you can't drain it into the stream.
No,
I-
off to under the ground.
I don't know who you're gonna ask, but I know for one, Basil Littlefield who does stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. So we can get that. The police cruiser has all been gone over and serviced, that's ready to go for this season. Knock on wood, it's gonna have no problems. I don't know if you guys have all noticed around that we are getting quite an influx of deer in the area. They're chewing up everything. As Steve can tell probably by now, that Upper Bayview Park, there's a perfect line up the hedge line.
I was noticing. it's
From
not-
that down is where the deer's been chewing. There's stuff over in the other park that they've chewed on. At the basketball court, there's one bush on the upper hillside that they've chewed that all up. Private people have asked me about these, and I said, the deer. We gotta increase the deer. It was a hard winter. Those things are easy for them to get at for food. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention, because I know people are gonna start asking me, what's going on? But there is an influx of deer.
Are you asking us to do something about that?
There's nothing to do on it unless you get a hunting license.
I'm just curious how you brought it up.
Well, because people are gonna say, I was expecting Steve to say, hey, what's going on with the hedge? Because we planted a couple trees in there to fill in some holes. So, they chewed them up, and the rest of the hedge. In the middle part of Bayview Park, down where you go in towards Bill Cressy's and that, somebody drove up in the park and got that all rutted up. I think I can get that.
Was it you, Bill?
I think, I've talked to the lawn people, Basil and them, we may be able to get that fixed up for, $100, a little bit more. They'll have to haul in some loom, grass seeds and stuff, flatten it out, but, just wanted to bring that up. The next question is, there's a lot of things that I've been doing behind the scenes with all these committees, is one thing. So that's why I was cutting my thing short, because they're all gonna bring up lots. But one thing that I need to get clarified on is the village approved me up to $300 to buy a ladder for the outfloat. That's it. We tabled all the other discussions about ladders on the boat float and the dock.
Right.
If I remember, okay. That's all I wanted to clarify.
We agreed in principle, but we never approved anything.
That's my report.
Thank you, sir. Questions for Bill? Report of the office manager. Hello, office manager.
Hello.
Running around for the last hour.
Busy today.
Busy, yeah. I don't have a lot to report. Everything's been going really well. Amy has been helping me go through this entire billing cycle so that I understand the logistics of it. The one thing I will note is our printer is at the end of its life cycle, and it probably should be replaced for around $150. We can get a new one, and I'm not sure how much it would cost to service one, but I think it would, yeah, just be worth looking into replacing it. So that's the one thing I had to bring up.
Do you need authorization to do that?
Yeah, I would assume so.
I move that we authorize the office manager to buy a printer that's suitable for our needs at an expense of no more than $175.
Any discussion?
I think if you buy a printer that's like $250, it'll last a lot longer, given that, one of those ones with the trays and like a brother as opposed to just a home one, you get the quasi-commercial one, I think would make more sense. That's my discussion. Either way.
I stand persuaded.
Okay.
Not just
But-
250?
Yeah, 250 sounds reasonable
Yeah,
for
for
what you're
one of the-
talking about, like a semi-professional.
Because it does copying and other things too. and
Yeah,
the
we're
fax,
having a lot of issues. That's part of why I haven't
Yeah,
been in here
so-
this morning. This one is not.
They're just made for more
Right.
use.
Yeah, because this one does get a lot
Right.
out, so.
Okay.
Okay.
So I would withdraw my motion, modify my motion, since the motion says suitable for our purposes, I would just change the cap on the amount to $275.
Yes.
Okay.
Including the tax.
I was a little bit, I know.
Any further
We're
discussion?
getting evil.
I second that.
Second. Further discussion on 275 for Minnie, you'll take care of it when you get, I mean, it's good standards.
And I just bought one about that price, I'll tell you why I got it.
Yeah.
I really like it.
Yeah, that's what I got at home. I have one for around 300
Yeah.
days, yeah, so I think, yeah.
All in favor? It's unanimous, thank you.
No, it's not.
Oh, sorry, Lee, I
has a-
apologize. All opposed? Abstaining? I know we are opposed. 6-1.
Oh,
Anything else?
I don't disagree.
Just as a note, by the way, I do, and maybe other people here have access in our offices to lots of really fast printers. So if a situation arises where a meeting's about to happen and documents have it, let me know,
okay,
and I can spit out a lot of copies real
Yeah,
fast.
sure.
So I would be happy to take that on if it's an
Okay.
emergency situation.
yeah. We have a lot of last minute stuff today.
Yeah, just, and also, along those lines, the one we're talking about has the larger cartridges.
Yeah.
So the larger cartridges actually save us money in the long run, so maybe
Right.
he would change his mind on that one, because it's all about the ink cost.
The age grade is
It's
where
all
they
about
get
ink.
you.
Yeah.
I know somebody used to say you buy 5 printers at the same time, and when one starts to go bad, just throw it away, you reach in the closet, you get it.
Because of the ink is just as much.
The
Right.
ink costs more. Anything else? No. Now we'll move to committee reports, and Bill has scared me because it sounds like they're going to be extensive beyond what I was aware of. But we'll start with Vicki and the tree ordinance and tree planting.
Okay, so I gave everybody a heads up, I have for several months that we wanted to try to update the tree ordinance. I have here copies of the current tree ordinance if you all want it. My computer skills are limited, so I couldn't send this out with the other stuff. And then I sent out copies of some updates and things that I myself did on one, and John Woolsey was kind enough to take on the other. And so I don't necessarily want to vote on a new tree ordinance today. I want to make sure we're going in the right direction and everybody's on the same page and talk about any questions anybody might have. Does anybody want copies of the other things that I emailed? I've got copies of those if you need, but maybe hopefully
Do you have a copy of the proposed ordinance in front of you? I can just-
I've got two, the ones with the lines, John Wilson did in red line, that's the current,
Thanks.
I mean, that's the one with some changes.
Judy?
I just had 3 comments. First, guys are doing great work, and you already know that, you don't need to say that. Second, the ordinance goes further than the old one in that it acknowledges that there will be a fine, but the law requires that there be a range.
Oh, okay.
And that there will be the need to have a public hearing to solicit public comment, but we do have the authority to adopt it. We don't have to wait until August. So if you wanted to piggyback, do a public hearing at the same time with the May 24th hearing or the zoning or something, you don't want to do that.
Oh, okay, great. I knew it didn't need to be, I was confused with what John had, because it said it had to be voted on at the annual meeting. It doesn't need to be voted
Not
on
an
at the
ordinance.
annual. Okay, arrange for the fines, and actually that fine was in the original one that it says that you'll be billed based on current blah, 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 abandoned freight things. So you just want us to put a monetary piece on that.
Well, one is that's the remedy, that's remediation. That's,
Oh.
The other is a fine. You can charge, ordinance to be enforceable has to have not only the remediation, you have to pay for the tree that you destroyed, but also could be $25 a day or $1,000 a day, and there has to be an opportunity for a hearing. If you look at our fire ordinance, it's that type of due process element.
Is there something you would suggest in there? Is it a dollar amount?
I would have a high end for damage to trees of $1,000 a day or so. But.
Lee?
The only question I have, these trees in Bayside, they're not marked public and private. How is anyone going to know which is a public tree and which was a private tree? And how would the person who's going to be fined for something like that know the difference?
Mike was up.
That is a concern I have with it, and I actually have given Vicki some comments on that with respect to that. One comment I have with that is I don't think it's fair to put Billy sort of as the arbitrator of who's going to decide which tree is in and which tree is out. That's one of the things that somehow has to be worked out, how you figure that out. Maybe Judy has a comment on that. But my thing with that is more along the lines of once it is in or out, I don't think it's Billy's responsibility to sort of be enforcing this and handing out the fines, right? That would have to be from the police officer, correct?
My goal would be that it would not be limited to the police officer. The village agent is essentially the boss. And we only have a police officer on duty for certain periods of time. We have a village agent 365 days a year, so I wouldn't want to limit the enforcement authority.
Well, and the
No
original.
days off, Bill.
The original intent of the tree warden is that the tree warden was going to also have, if not jurisdiction, then oversight over
Yeah.
this. Judy, you had.
I would just want to comment on the public-private thing. I think one very easy definition is if it's on public land. Now, we all...
But what if it's right in the middle?
If it's right in the middle, Bill has worked together with the town of Northport to determine, and to my knowledge, there's never been too much of a problem determining who owns what, although I've seen people very disappointed when they found out that it was on their property, because they wanted, obviously not to have to bear the expense. But until it's contested, I think it's been working appropriately. If somebody has asked me about a tree or asked Bill, I would ask Bill, and Bill would go and look at it and say, yes, no, not sure, bring in the town person, and then the decision is made.
Mike?
Things tend to get clouded when it's time to spend money to fix something. So one of the good things about what the tree committee is going to do is when we start cataloging the trees, all that stuff can be somewhat, the ones on the line can be arranged somewhat in advance so people can come to an understanding before we have a catastrophic event and then it comes down to dollars. So that might help some too.
Is there a sense of when this cataloging might occur by?
We've done it. We have cataloged, last summer, we cataloged the majority of trees in the public areas where there might be injury to person or damage to property. So all the parks, Cradle Row, the fire station, the community hall, the library.
6 a.m. shifts.
And I have to say that you know, at this point, and with this tree board, and certainly this year, that is what we're going to work with to move on. I'm going to move, now, is any other comments on the ordinance? Because that is a great lead-in. Yes, sir.
Two comments. One is bullet number 3, talking about work being done by a licensed arborist or other tree maintenance company approved by tree warden. And then the paragraph below number 6 says, no person other than a licensed arborist. Seems contradictory, because we use people like Basil and other people. I mean, I think bullet 3 summarizes what we do.
Right.
And I think the point down below is contradictory and restrictive.
And I will say, I was going to say this, that yes, Basil Littlefield and his group do a lot. I received an email from him saying that, you know, if we needed help with plantings, his group did that. And so I would say we can change it to where appropriate, or, you know, an individual skill in
Just
this. Yeah.
whatever you really intend to do.
I mean,
Yeah, and the other comment was that the whole notion of contracted by the tree warden, we got ourselves into quite a mess with that, because when Jane Phillips was our tree warden, things were relatively well organized and moved forward on a concerted basis. And since you took over, things have gotten back under control, but you're doing this on a temporary basis. So finding someone to do this is wonderful, but I think the village agent needs to be looped into this.
Okay, yeah.
I think leaving this solely in the hands of the tree warden is asking for some kind of conflict along the way.
So, and then I had a couple comments that I.
Well,
Go ahead.
I just want to say, my desire is that that we start blending the tree warden with the tree committee also. So I'll somehow or the other reword that.
Okay.
I think that's a good point.
Mike?
And along the lines of money, I had suggested to Vicki that we actually have the tree committee provide 2 budgets, the removal budget and then the replanting budget each year, because I think that they're kind of being driven by 2 different things there. You know, because we are supposed to be replacing trees and we never seem to do that. So if we could allocate some money, and my suggestion was, and I put it in an email to Vicki, I don't need to get into the details, was that we kind of have a 2-year plan, where we have, these are the trees that are the priority replacements this year. These are next year's. We'll revise next year's when they become this year's. And then that sort of is a separate budget that runs on its own. And I also suggested that we consider doing that in 2 sort of extremes. One is planting real seedlings where we want them. And then also the other one is devising a canopy replacement plan, which I've looked at a bunch of them in parks recently, and I have some suggestions about how you plant new trees inside of the existing canopy that start to grow up. They don't block anybody's view, but they're growing up inside of the other tree, and then when that tree dies, it's there already.
This sounds like committee.
It does, but
Perfect
that's-
easy conversation.
Right.
So noting that the next meeting of this group is on the 12th, and you may want to, by the 24th, be part of the public hearing on this, if it's possible to sort of reorganize this ordinance so that this group can make some more official commentary on it on the 12th. Mike?
Yeah, I just have one question about the fine. What's the mechanism for deciding what the fine is?
I would propose that your committee look at what we did with the fire ordinance. There's a process by which a notice violation is served by the employee of the town, be it the cop or the village agent, and then there is a hearing, and basically through the overseers.
And you want that in the ordinance? Want that spelled out in the ordinance?
Yes.
Okay, and I just, I constantly have to ask Mike to take baby steps. So we are, okay, I'm moving into the rest. I am currently trying to make arrangements with the arborist that took down a couple of our trees and pruned the tree we're calling the beast at the end of Bayside Park. That tree needs some recabling. He's able to do that. We're trying to get together. What I would like to do is start to put together a protocol for looking at, again, these trees that are in public areas that could cause damage to people or property, the park trees, and get a plan together for pruning prevention, you know, is the name of my game, professionally, and also I think it's something that we've kind of done as needed for these trees, but everything I've read is, once you plant them, you have to do everything to keep them as healthy as they can be. And we have some beautiful, huge, old trees that I think just need a bit of pruning. So that's what he's going to help me put together, hopefully. So that's our plan. And hopefully the people will be back in May, and we will have a tree committee meeting sometime in May, although some people will not be back. So, great work. That's the trees. And so thank you.
Thank you, you are doing fabulous work, thank you so much.
I do not live in a disorganized universe, according to
Anything else?
Einstein. Yes, I gotta find my note. Okay, we do have, we think we found a plan for labeling trees. We've got little tags, so we'll number the trees that have been inventoried so that we can keep track of them. So that's something we're gonna work on this summer. And my personal favorite is put together a little Arbor Day Fest, and maybe in conjunction with when the safety committee puts on their little fest. I may have said that before. Name this leaf, that kind of thing. Okay, and last year we talked about plantings around the basketball court, and initially we asked the tree committee if they wanted to take it on. The tree committee was very new, and they said absolutely not. But I do think that there is some crossover there, and since we do have some budget, and currently we have $5,000 left in our budget, I have nothing at this point needed to spend it on, but I will have a better idea of that when I talk to the arborist. I was wondering if you would consider that we use a portion of our tree budget for plantings. One of the plantings that we discussed at the end of last year for safety reasons at the basketball court. I still have the quote from Bryn, the one that we accepted. It's $2,500 or less is what her proposed cost of this is, and as we all know, the safety committee is not at this point. So it would involve some bushes and trees, so it makes it somewhat logical if we need that. Any thoughts?
Judy?
I apologize for the micromanagement this question reveals. In light of what Billy has just told us about the deer, I wonder if the species that we had approved on Bryn's plan need to be looked at again. That's what I'm concerned about.
Well, that has changed. She is proposing Rosa rugosas because of their hardiness. Also, they're a little prickly.
Yeah.
I would think maybe deers don't particularly care for them, but I'm not 100% sure what deer's like. But maybe we could include something in there that is deer, that repulsive.
Okay,
One second, Michael.
Just to clarify for context, because we've talked about this, this is a plan based on a donation of material, park donation of material. Now, because we had that donation available to us last year, and we just didn't do it, some of that material's changed. So, and some of the plan has changed based on that. So what we're trying to do is, that's why there's a number there, which is a sort of not to exceed number. But we're working now to figure out what's available, and it looks like more rugosa is available, which would be.
Okay. Then my second hyper question is that Rosa rugosa is now on the invasive species list in Maine, and so landscape architects are being told by the state of Maine not to use it. So I wouldn't want to use it. I know, I was surprised as well, but that's what just happened in the case of mine. Yeah.
She says here, and I apologize, we have 5 large-ish hydrangeas that have been donated. So there's a combination. We talked about the Rosa rugosas.
So is there a motion do we need it to expend that money, or has the money been approved for the tree committee and the tree committee?
It's that sort of planting is in the tree committee budget. I think that kind of a sizable spend is worthy of discussion.
Yeah.
That's why we're bringing it up, and
I want to go back to something Mike said, which is about we're wonderful at taking trees down and less wonderful at putting trees back up. And although there is 5,000 currently in your budget, I would as well take a look at where have we not put trees back up where we should have, and maybe expend some money in that direction before this issue around the basketball court, which I sometimes feel is a solution looking for a problem. So spending half your budget on that seems to me to be a lot, in my opinion.
I do not foresee that we will be planting, this spring or summer. Okay, I think I would rather have a plan, and I know we want to have the infrastructure committee look at the plan. And the only trees that I'm aware of that need to be replaced were the ones that I was in charge of having taken down. I don't know what other ones are, but if people have that information, I'll put them on the list. So, but they're trees that we took down in places that I certainly wouldn't say, we need to replant right there because they were awkward and horribly placed and near houses and wires and all sorts of things, which is why they cost so much to take down. So everybody's okay with finding an appropriate place that fits in with what our goals would be to replant trees, and I think that takes some thought along with the type of tree. So I'm finding somebody who's going to do it, and where do we find the tree? We can get little trees for free or big trees for a couple $1,000. So I think it needs some thought. So I don't see that planting trees is going to take off right away. What I'd like to do is say we're going to plant 3 trees, get the guy in, he digs 3 big holes, he puts the trees in, we know what we're doing.
Okay. Mike?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think what we need to do is if we can come up with this sort of 2-year plan, I think the goal would be to have something to present to the annual meeting. It says, here's the 2-year plan. And then everybody understands what it is, because, the elephant in the room is that some of the trees that are planted do not survive. And they don't survive for human reasons, which is why we have to have these fines, right? So one of the ways I think to deal with that is to have this be a public process where everybody can vote on it, and we can take everybody's opinion into account, and then then that's the plan. And then at that point, when someone sabotages it, they're on an island.
Judy?
So as I understand the question we're being asked today, is really an affirmation of a plan that we've already put in place, I think, at our September meeting.
Where the money was coming.
We're being asked if we are ready to move forward with the up to $2,500 for the protective barrier around the basketball court.
One end of the basketball court that borders the...
And I think I'm prepared to move forward with that, with the provisos that I want to assure that we've thought about the invasive species list, that we're worrying about deer eating things. I don't want to pay for something twice. And I want to say that I agree 100% with John that this is a solution looking for a problem. I'm not sure we need this, but our citizens have told us we need this, and I think we should do it.
Okay. Ed, further discussion on this?
Okay, so we can move forward with the tree warden, a portion of the tree warden budget not to exceed $2,500 to proceed with planting and at the one end of the basketball court.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
And thank you to Bryn.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I will, once we nail Bryn down to species, I'll just make sure everybody gets a copy of that, before they go in, and whatever we can do to keep everybody up to date. Okay, I think that's...
Bill, you have a question?
Just a reminder, whoever you hire to do this work, make sure they have all the proper stuff that they have to have.
Absolutely, good point, thank you.
Anything else? Becky?
No, not with trees, I think.
I just want to say, by the way, that I had earlier, and Judy had brought it up first, noted that on May 24th is going to be the zoning ordinance meeting, and possibly doing some piggybacking on that, I think is your term.
Yes, it's the 24th and it is the 25th.
25th. Don't feel beholden to that. The tree ordinance, again, You could have a public meeting in July on that, that's perfectly fine. You do it when you feel, when your committee feels like it's time to present something to the public. So don't rush it just because there's something happening in mid-May. All right. Communications, Judy?
And I have the 2019 invasive species list, I'll email it to you. 2018, or whatever.
I just have one more question about that. Is that within 250 feet of the shore where this planting is going to take place? It is, right?
Oh,
Yes.
it's at the basketball court, yeah, it's right
So-
across from.
So just remember, the species list is very important with respect to shoreline zoning, so,
Oh, I see.
okay?
So I'm going to bundle communications and governance again in my report, if that's okay with you, John. Last month, or I guess 3 weeks ago, I was asked to prepare, at Steve's request, I think it was a good one, a summary statement as to where the overseers were on Nordic Aqua Farms. Danny was very kind to post my report as to where we are, which is information gathering and trying to learn as much as we can. I think even as of the moment this was posted, it was a bit out of date because I know that the DEP has given the preliminary approval or accepted the application as complete. I think upstream was still arguing there wasn't right title and interest. And I think DEP passed the right title and interest, at least according to the Bangor Daily News on Wednesday.
That's incorrect.
Well, at least according to the Bangor Daily News on Wednesday. So I've done that. In the process of doing that and trying to be as objective as possible in the report, I did find a really helpful link that's on the City of Belfast website, and I encourage all our residents to go there. They're doing a really good job of putting everything for, against, and neutral on a page that's called Nordic Aqua Farms. So that is a really useful resource. I didn't know, but Danny had already copied that resource on his own page on BaysideMaine.com. So that's one thing I accomplished. The other thing, the survey went out. We're getting some good response. I don't mean good responses. I mean we're getting responses. We will be sending out a reminder to the residents via BaysideMaine.com that they still have an opportunity to respond, and a reminder of the public hearing that will be on May 25th. And when I say, this isn't a public hearing, this is a public meeting. We aren't asking people to opine on an existing ordinance draft. What we're asking is the visioning that this ordinance is trying to get at. So we're having good conversation about that. I hope that you all will come to represent the village, and I hope that you'll get your neighbors to come. It's on the Saturday of the Memorial Day weekend, so we should have a lot of people here, and it's at 4 o'clock, right when people will probably be tired of sweeping up dead spiders and flies from opening up their cottages. So that's what we're doing on governance. And I think that's my report on communications governance. But I saw that Jeffrey had
I was going to ask what, you answered it before. It was just what time?
Judy, can you maybe just create a sheet or two that can be posted around the office soon, and so that people coming here over the next month will know that that meeting's occurring and where it's, and the time and all that?
Yeah.
Just so that, Bayside means one.
And then with regard to the survey, is there a cutoff day when you're stopping and then when you're compiling them before the hearing? Is it?
The next notice that we have prepared to put a post on April 30th will say that we want all answers by May 15th so that I can make some type of summary. I'm not promising you that I will have done that. I've chosen May 15th because I'm through with the trial on May 15th, and so presumably on May 16th I will get my head out of that. But we'll see.
I think it would be helpful if we could see the comments, but we don't want to see who they're from. So maybe if you, as you get them, you could give them to Mandy, and she could genericize them in sort of a list summary thing.
Yep, and that's what I hope to do.
Great,
And
awesome.
many of them are anonymous unless I've gotten them by email.
Excellent.
So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Finance, Judy?
I have nothing to report on finance.
Thank you. Infrastructure, Mr. Lannon?
Yes. So I sent along the geotech report. We have had 2 infrastructure meetings. since our last meeting. The first one, we went over a bunch of items like roads and things, and given the winter we had, we are in a lot better shape than we thought we were gonna be, which is gonna be a good thing for budgeting. I'm not gonna get into too much of that, because we'll get into it when we get into the budgeting stuff down the road. But the one item that is a little bit different from that spreadsheet you sent me, just so you know, is Oak Street. We did not finish that work. We started that work, but we did not finish that. There's some issues there with us, drainage at the end, and then there's some issues with what the town has done by creating a small swale there. As anybody who was here this winter knows, that was a sheet of ice. It was very scary, frankly. If you didn't know when you came around that corner, it was bad news. So Billy's working with the town on what they're gonna do about the swale, and that will be part of our budget for, it was supposed to be done this year, but I don't think it's in the budget, correct?
I have to go back and look, because I've got a lump sum number.
Right.
And I haven't broken out within the budget what's there. So we have to go back and look at what the proposal was, because I think there was money in there specifically for our regular updates to roads.
Yes.
And then a project. I don't remember which one it was.
Okay, because the way I remember it is that we had some carryover money, and this was gonna be in that carryover money, but we spent it already, right?
We spent it on.
Yeah, okay. So then there is no money, really. We can go back and look at it, but that's what the answer is. So we just need to think about how we're gonna deal with that, when we're gonna deal with it. And frankly, now that we have this town issue too, it might be something that it's gonna take a little while to coordinate the proper. We're gonna try to get our runoff to the storm drain, but then they've gotta get theirs from the road there too, so it's something to work on. It's enough about that, right? So that was really what we talked a lot about there. One of the other things we talked about at that meeting was talking a little bit about the differentiation in the village between roadways and walkways and how we're going to deal with that. And I think that's something we can talk about this afternoon. We don't have to do that now, but just something that we should talk about is how we handle those, how we upkeep those, because some of the walkways have kind of turned into roadways, and now are we maintaining them as roadways, or are we still maintaining them as walkways? So that's something to discuss. Then we have issues with snow plowing and different areas in the future, and how we're going to make them safe to do, and are we going to do it? So again, things to talk about this afternoon. So that's really kind of it with respect to that first meeting we had. We went over a bunch of items of what off the spreadsheet from Steve. The second meeting was strictly about the seawall, and that was the geotech report that I forwarded on to everyone. We went through it. We did have some questions. In the geotech report, the goal of that was to determine what the base structure would be for the wall, which we've done, and it's kind of what we thought it would be. It's glacial till and fill. And based on that type of base, the best kind of wall is a vertical sort of loading. That's one of the things to consider. So that can be done with the revetment or the wall, so it doesn't eliminate one of those options. It's just something that is going to fit into the design. They're working on the design now. I think I sent a figure along with some circles on it. Did I send you that?
No, that doesn't sound familiar.
No, then I sent it to the infrastructure committee. Essentially, Billy and I had gone through the stuff in the park, and we had circled all the things that we need access to. You know, we mentioned the mark that's out there. We asked, does it have to stay? Can it be moved? We don't know if you need to, but what's the deal with that? We need access to the wastewater treatment plant. Trucks need to get around, the boat ramp, the floats in and out, all that stuff. So hopefully in their new site layout, they're going to have a system where that's going to work. The plan is they're doing one site layout for both options. The circle will be pulled back in both those options into the park a little bit, but it's historically, if you look around this room, it's in places it's been before. And the idea behind that is we can maintain the parking no matter what, because that's been a very big issue for everyone. If we do the vertical wall, we might have a park and then a little bit of an area in front of it where people could sit, so there's an advantage there. We're still looking at, obviously, both options through the 50%. We should have it done by the end of May. We're still on schedule for that. We're supposed to be getting the layout sometime next week, and I'll forward that around. We're going to discuss that at the infrastructure committee. We are trying to proactively comment to get to where we are, and that's what we did, so we can stay on schedule. That's enough about that. As I mentioned, the roads are in good shape. I took a look at the snow removal and catch basin contracts. Both of those have been updated in 15 and 17, and it's my understanding from talking to Billy that they're updated every few years, and I don't know what that means. So that's throwing that out to when do we need to look at that again, and when does that have to be sort of redone? So it's a question. I don't know if historically anybody has an answer of how often it's sort of one of those things. It's as soon as it's done, it starts to date itself, and then eventually it needs to be redone, but I don't know when the actual date is.
So when you say the snow removal, what you're talking about is which roads they plow?
Yes.
Yeah, and so I think that historically, based on what you've just reported, we've done it every other year. 15, 17, I guess 19 would be a good time to look at it.
Well, no, the one was 15. So we have two agreements. One is cleaning of the roads, like catch basins, cleaning those out, taking care of that stuff, repaving, and then the second one is snow removal. So there's kind of two sort of separate things.
So it's probably a good idea to revisit.
The way it's worded at the end though, it's it can continue along.
Unless
There's
someone-
no set time when they redo it. So usually what happens, it's either Barbara or I will suggest it's time to renew it because you got a whole different bunch of select people down there that might not understand it.
Right.
So maybe it's time to revisit it, just to keep the selectmen aware of the process.
Oh, so that's really what triggers it. Okay.
Right. And what's good is that we cleaned up that language 3 or so years ago, such that the town and the village are in agreement about the roads and the process. So it is pretty moot, as I recall that now.
So I know we all sat down, Eamon, the town, myself. Was it you?
I think I was there, or at least I was aware of
Yeah,
how
I
it came
think
out.
you were there. We all sat down, everybody was there and discussed everything.
Yeah.
together.
You know, under the water agreement we have, it's a perpetual agreement, but we commit to every 5 years essentially have a conversation about how's it going.
Right.
And I think that's a healthy thing to do.
Right.
It doesn't require us to renegotiate our
Exactly.
rights to water, but, because that would be scary. But it does say, yeah, is this working well? And I think that's how you guys put it together a couple
Yeah.
years ago, is this working well? I think the idea of triggering it to selectmen, because we do have some new people to the community on the board, that would be helpful.
Yeah, and where it's kind of individual roads and things, I think people have more opinions than water to water. So maybe it needs to be more often than every 5 years, but it probably doesn't need to be every year, or like you said, maybe every other year. Anyway.
I mean, we were gonna try it for every year, but they just said, no, we don't need to revisit
No,
this.
I think-
There's too much for us to
Yeah,
deal with.
too much.
So, I mean, there's one that's 2015 is the most recent one, so that one should be sort of updated, I think.
Most recent signed one, you're saying?
Yeah, one's 15 and one's 17 right now. I have copies of it, not here, I thought I did. They're actually on the desk.
Forward them to me, and
Okay.
we'll talk about it, and
Yeah,
talk to Barbara about it.
either way, right,
Okay.
I just, okay?
Great.
And then, wharf maintenance, we're gonna talk a little bit about some of the things on the safety committee, so I can get into that. But, you know, we didn't start our maintenance last year, the proactive stuff. There is still budget left to do that, Steve? That's a question?
Bear with me.
Okay, and so that was one of the things I wanted to find out about, because that will feed into some sort of the budgeting for next year. While you're looking for that, just the community hall, I think we've gone over everything there. I think it's really, right now, we have the drainage issues, and we have the getting Bayside Arts to be able to use it and quickly put their stuff up and down so everybody can use it well. I think we're on a good pathway for that. So that's basically it. We have a new contract coming up for the lawn this year, right, Billy?
The end of the,
Yeah, so that, I would just like us to think about, maybe we can talk about later today or another time, what we want to do sort of with walkways in there, because we don't really have them do much in the walkways, and whether we want to have them brush cut them every year or something. I think we should just talk about that so people can use them a little bit more and keep trees from growing up in the middle, might help us down the road too, because then we have to take those down. So it's just sort of a proactive maintenance thing. So
Is there a
we can
map?
talk.
Is there a map that shows the walkways in the village?
There
Only-
is.
Only the walkways, rather?
No, I'm working on one, I'm working on a better.
Thank you.
That'd be great though, because what they call the paper road's right in front of my house. I used to mow it, but I don't now. And it's really lovely, but towards the middle of the summer, it gets really overgrown.
Yeah, so that's gonna fit in with, I'm putting together a spreadsheet of roadways and walkways.
Thank you.
And in that roadways thing, I'm gonna talk about when they've been resurfaced and all these things, and what utilities there are in those right now, and then same with the walkways.
Thank you.
Okay?
Steve?
$16,000, and it's about 12 for just that and the other things, so probably about 4 for preventative.
Which was what we had, so we haven't spent any of that yet. Okay, so that's good to know. So the last thing is actually a lead into the safety committee. Someone had come to me and said that it would be really great if on like the July 4th things and so on, we could close off Main Street in the park and make cars come in Maple and go out Park Row for events. Because it's a safe thing for kids. We wouldn't have any cars in the middle. Cars can be all the way around, but they wouldn't be in the middle. And that's, to me, that's a great idea, but it's a safety committee thing, and I'm gonna segue to you by that.
Well, actually,
Surprise.
Or whatever's next.
just to note that, any questions first for Mike? Thank you, that was a great report. We have utility committee, at least on the list next. I don't know if you want to jump in.
Well, we had our utility committee last week, 10 days ago. Because we didn't change that in response to this. The system is working great. The dechlorinization, I shouldn't be giving this report, is going in this week, right?
Yes.
It was, we did.
Wednesday or Thursday?
Yeah, Wednesday or Thursday is going to go in. Moore's will be in to pump out the tank at the same time. That's an important safety feature for our employees for handling the chemicals, particularly since now we're going to year-round testing. So we're excited about getting something a little up to date. We continue to work under the EPA, the new license, where we have to think about having the right building in the right place for the work that we're going to have to do on a year-round basis. So we're looking at that. We have to put together a plan for us at this point. We have no action items for you at this point. We will have an action item related to a sewer disconnection when we meet next time.
Judy, that building plan that Director's putting together, which will, I assume, first be presented to the Utilities Committee and then to the overseers. What's the schedule on that?
I think that we want to do this in the right order. And the first thing is to determine whether or not this new pelletizer process, so we have to chlorinate and dechlorinate, right? So, and then now we have to, with the new permit, we have to do it all year long. And in doing it all year long, the dechlorination chemical gels up in August. So imagine what it's going to do in January. It's going to freeze solid. So if we have to go back to the old system, we will need to make certain modifications to the building. If we can use the new system, we'll make different modifications. So we want to see if this new pellet approach works better first. So we should have something in the next couple of months to remain on the schedule with the compliance, with the DEP and EPA.
The compliance schedule that we have with them anticipates anything new that we have to do being done in 2020.
Yes.
The end of 2020.
So if there is going to be a new building, it's not going to happen this year.
It would not happen before the annual meeting. So let's do that right now. That's.
Right, and I'm looking over your shoulder at
Right.
Gordon to make sure Gordon's also, Gordon, do we have anything else to report based on our meeting?
No.
And we've got 4.
I mean, there may be a possibility to do something at the end of this year to test things for next year. So we don't have to do it till 2020, but if we could run a winter where we figure out how we have to run a winter, because we never have, without being under the gun of compliance, that would be helpful. So.
Understood. Thank you. Any questions for Judy? Then, indeed, let's move on to safety. Michael?
Yeah. Okay, so I've got 2 action items. Let's do the easy stuff first. And then, as I understand it, we're going to have a drop down into a conversation about 2020 budget. Yeah? So the safety committee has a proposal, and I'd like to make a motion that we do a safety day, the annual safety day, this is June we want to move the date to Sunday, July 7th, because of the committee believes and including think that there's so much going on in the park, I'd like to tease it apart a bit. So, you know, the piece about closing Main Street, et cetera, is part of the discussion, I would imagine, first I heard it. Yeah, so we have that as, I don't know if that requires board approval, but if it does, I'll make a motion.
I think in the past we have had a motion, in past years, when.
Well, I'm happy to support the motion to have a safety day on July 7th, as sponsored by the safety committee, and hope that we can all bake for you.
Seconded by Lee, any discussion?
Are we making hot dogs?
Well, we're having hot dogs, the plan is to have hot dogs, but not so much of a free giveaway. It's going to be a little earn the hot dog thing going on.
Excellent.
Have some kind of.
Be safe and earn a hot dog.
Contest or something. Everyone gets a trophy in the form of a hot dog.
All be said.
Okay, so we have to vote.
A vote, any further discussion? All in favor? That's unanimous.
Okay, the second thing is, you have in front of you the public safety form. We have had deliberations over. This is part of our ongoing evolution as a committee to look at how we function as a committee and what can be done to make things function differently in the sense of when people have concerns around public safety. This form has not been amended since the last meeting. I didn't think it would be. It's open for consideration or and I hope approval. This is a form. Now the process would be, folks have a concern or a suggestion, a complaint, that this form is available in the community hall, and the process of filling it out, and then the village agent, our advocacy is the village agent figures out from there who is the right person or persons, whether it's the board or the police department, to act on this and to further. Sometimes, of course, it would be an overlap between the two, maybe, the board and police and whomever else. But it is what it is, and it's our intent that we get this approved so we have it in place for the start of the season, and we can communicate about it.
Well, one thing I think is that you probably would want to have this go out through BaysideMaine.com also, which would mean that you would add to the bottom the NBC email, so that people would return it by email. It should be a fill out form online, ideally, so that people don't have to print it, write on it, scan it, or anything silly like that. It should be something they can fill out online. Because realistically, that's how a lot of people learn about what's going on, and so.
I think there's two different things. The complaint ought to only have the nbcmaine@gmail.com address for where the email complaint can go, or comment, not necessarily complaint. To let the world know about this resource being available, yes, BaysideMaine.com is a wonderful tool to do that. I just want to make sure that we're not saying that the complaint should be sent to Danny.
No, that's what I'm saying. It has to say.
Because he wouldn't want those.
No, it would need to say that, and the form itself should say, return this form to.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean he won't get one or two.
Let me ask for clarification. Are you suggesting that the form go on the website, not just available at the community hall?
No, both places. And I think at one time, Danny, my recommendation would be at one time, Danny, send this out, saying we have a new form, you can find copies here, I'm giving you a copy of it now, don't send it back to me. If you want to print this out at home, or however you want to, this is a form, save it, and you can send it back to NBC Maine.
Just add.
So announcing it,
Exactly,
and
announcing it.
distributing it via the website.
Exactly, because, and we should, take 5 or so, and of course the summer, thumbtack them up on boards around, if people want to grab one off a board, they can do that too.
Full of rain.
Just give people as many ways as possible to access. I don't think you have to do this all year long and every year. I'd just say up front, I would make this as available as possible.
So just add the NBC Maine at the bottom. I love the form. I love the form because it has, the first obligation is to put your name on it. If you have a comment, be willing to say it, be willing to own the comment.
Exactly, and I would say that if that's not there, they will not be acknowledged. I mean, I don't know, we need to put that disclaimer in there, but it needs to be dated and signed in order to be considered.
Phone number / email
Yeah.
on there, Michael, up top.
So, We want the local address, right? We don't, I mean, if a renter were to fill this out, or someone who lives somewhere else, what address is it?
Well, I think it's the contact address.
Is that what it is? Oh, okay.
That's how I got it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter where they live,
Oh,
but that if they
Yeah,
have a
because the
if they have a
comment is gonna
safety
be, when
issue.
I was at the cottage, I was renting at,
Exactly.
then this thing happened. I lit a fire and people complained, and I'm not,
So is that a suggestion? Are we changing that?
I would,
No, this is great, thank you so much.
Yeah, so-
Okay, great. So we don't need to approve it. And I don't know that, we've had conversations in the past about the safety committee's revised mission statement. I think we're operating with it. Do we need to do anything on it or more further?
Is it somewhere in the minutes and is it officialized in that way?
Yeah, it has been submitted.
Yeah.
I
I can,
last meeting.
Yeah, but-
yeah,
and I would probably put it in the safety, you'll tell me, of course, but my expectation is it will be, in the safety committee statement that goes to the town meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, so we'll characterize it formally there. Okay, so that was the fun part, easy part. Now let's get into the other stuff. And I'll ask, of course, this is my first time with one of these committee level drop-downs into next year's budget. So having not been part of one in the past, I may be doing it entirely wrong. So I'll ask that you keep that in mind as we go through. However, I do have, Steve was nice enough, and I'm grateful, Steve, he sent along a worksheet that is basically the say, dozen or so line items that comprise the safety committee budget. Yeah, and I have not. We have and so we're going to have a conversation. So this might take a little bit of time. And we have. So let me send that around. And we have. Some of these are going to be easier than others. There's a whole police component that we're going to have Michael speak to as part of the conversation. And Michael, I'll ask if you could, when we're ready, keep that focused and brief so we can have and I'll distribute what we have prepared.
I will do my best.
Okay, so we want to go from the top down and look at these, because I'm going to go a little out of order. Lifeguards budget at this year's spend at $67.50. We are, and that is basically, Steve, as I understand it, that's basically assuming 7 days coverage at this level of.
No, that unfortunately, it is a number that was presented to us by last year's safety committee, and I do not know what their assumptions were. But if you look back to 2018, we spent $8,400.
Right.
So
Yeah, I misspoke. So what we're saying is we want to spend, we don't want to go below that because we want the same coverage for 2020. So, yeah, so the numbers that are in 6750, to your point, that's a projection based on.
yeah, there's one of the challenges that we face is that we have to make decisions on our budget oftentimes before we see what we're actually spending.
Right.
And that holds true for safety more so than any other aspect of the village, because we're setting a budget that has to be done by July 1st, and your spending occurs in July and August. So we just don't have visibility to it until after the fact.
Right.
So what had happened there was a discussion that took place in one of our meetings that said the 8369 is an unacceptably high number because we were covering in the fall season all day, every day, which people weren't swimming. They weren't down at the dock at 8 o'clock in the morning because it was 90 degrees. And the committee at that time backed down from the $8,300 value used the prior year, saying, you know what, we don't need lifeguards as long every day. It's just a different season of year, so instead of having 8-hour lifeguard days and I'm making up the numbers, you might have 5-hour lifeguard days. So the number was reduced somewhat based upon that logic. But I don't have the details behind what the safety committee proposed.
Judy?
Can I have clarification as to what you just said, coverage in the fall season? Did you mean after August 15th when the kids disappeared? Okay, because I'm like, we have coverage in the fall
It's through.
That's almost went through, like,
Yeah.
but after the peak season's gone by.
So after August 15th, when the southerners go down, and our summer's just beginning.
Well, I guess what we were looking at the committee level is the 2018 number, if that's a real number. versus
That was what we
projection.
spent. Yeah.
And our expectation was that we would have the same coverage.
And you're welcome to take that position.
I would put 8,400 in to be safe. We found ourselves backing up on safety decisions based on dollars concerning the police officer,
Yeah.
because we weren't dealing with reality. I think we should deal with the reality number, even if it means we have a savings, which is what I would like to have at the end of the year.
Yeah, okay, so, sorry, go ahead.
Can you tell me what the rate was in 2018 versus what it would be in 2020 projection?
I don't
The rate per hour?
Yeah.
Unchanged.
It'll be unchanged. Okay.
Steve, as we go through this, are you gonna run the real? So we
Yeah,
have a,
that's a 25% increase
yeah.
over this year's budget. And
Right,
additional-
but again, yeah, before,
Just before, we'll
yeah,
get,
before I, why do I always sit this?
Lee hasn't been swimming a lot.
But to say, to say it's in the budget, to say it's 25% increase over, but the number in the budget, as we've discovered, some of these numbers are, they're,
So there is value in this, in that we're discussing it as a group. Thank you. Move on.
Okay, so that's that. We have the number for equipment and maintenance, and Bill, this is where we get into, is this where the defibrillator is in?
I don't know.
Probably.
The discussion that I had with Steve yesterday, because I asked him about the way I understood the equipment and maintenance line item, I thought was for all of protection and safety, which included the police department. So like I had said to him, it's like repair of radio, I would have put under equipment maintenance line item, and he's saying, no, the equipment maintenance line item was for the lifeguards, not the police department.
So it's a sub.
So that was my misinterpretation of things that I got straight yesterday, and I think that's what you and I was having the discussion on.
Right.
Because we was trying to figure out where the defibrillator maintenance and stuff would come in.
So the thing I think we need to understand, Steve, is the 203 and 18. You know, what was that? We just don't have a.
You'd have to have Mandy pull all the invoices for you. What I can tell you these things usually are, they're sign replacements, typically lifeguard uniforms go in there. So if we buy them t-shirts or whatever it may be, that goes in there. If we replace the umbrella on the chair, if we did, I know we had done some repairs to the station that holds all the lifeguard supplies on the wharf.
Okay, so this number here that I've been, the printout is a little vague. Is that 7 or 750?
I think 750.
750.
750. The committee wanted to keep that number. Yeah. Okay, so let's move.
But what we're saying is we think that equipment line item is specific to the lifeguard.
Right, so this,
Yeah.
can you change this number, Steve, to be a subset of 6340 then?
I will, yeah.
Yeah, like at 41.
So much of what you're looking at is inherited from the start of accounting here in Bayside.
Yeah.
And the police one is one that we have focused on and made some adjustments, so that's now broken out into its own
Yeah, that's
discrete
very
category.
Right.
But before, everything was just kind of, there were no subtotals in a lot of these areas. So
Okay.
we've gradually kind of put those together. I'll make that happen for budget time.
Yeah, but
If it's,
this is my.
Yeah, I have a question. So if this is a line item just for lifeguards and there's potential that the 750 included other things at the time, should we make that number less?
Well, I don't know.
We don't know.
I don't know what the safety committee was thinking.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Let's just leave it. Okay, so now safety committee, the next line item, that is a vaguely worded one too, and I think that's basically for safety day and whatever else we do, right?
The safety committee had asked for some funds that they could just use, because we'd never done safety days before. They believed that was a good thing to do.
Yeah.
it, everybody agreed to it, we just need a way of characterizing it.
Yeah.
I could change that description to be almost anything known to mankind, but I thought safety day would be too restrictive.
Right, yeah.
Because
okay.
you might choose for whatever reason to bring a clown to an event that you have, just to get more participation in
Yeah.
the safety.
Well,
I was gonna say they do it.
They have one already, okay, so.
okay, so let's leave it, but that, we would like to keep that number at 150. so
Okay.
Okay, streetlights is next, that's pre-entered, and Steve, you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I increased the number, $6,400, that'll be a 5% increase over what we saw in 2018. That number keeps creeping up. I
Oh,
think
you've moved it to 65?
I moved it to 64 this morning.
64, okay.
Yeah.
You must have done that after we, yeah.
I did that this morning.
So if I'm reading this correctly, the budget for 2019 for that line was that 61 or 81?
61.
61.
You moved up 300.
I thought we were going down. Down.
Okay, that's good. Now let's skip down. The rest of it isn't that important. Let's skip down to hydrant rental. So we can cover that one, because I want to reserve enough time to have a conversation about the police company. Hydrant rental at, Steve, at 4696.
It's a fixed number.
Fixed number.
It's driven by what the utility is allowed to charge the village based upon PUC regulations.
Okay, so nothing we can do about it.
Nope.
Well, are we adding another hydrant this year or not?
That includes the third.
Oh, it does, okay, great.
So that other hydrant was supposed to have been added last year, so we had budgeted accordingly, expecting to have 2 new hydrants in place, and only one was put in. So that's the correct number for this year and going forward.
Okay, great.
And that number doesn't increase with inflation, that just stays the
So it's
same.
actually increased for this year because we're not.
Right, we should have savings on it this
Well,
year.
except that
So you might have
we're
money
going to have
to cover some of the
one
over-
trimester
Trimester.
savings.
Right, we'll have one trimester savings because we're going to be putting it in.
Which
this
can help
spring.
offset some of that extra police cost that we didn't account for this year.
Okay.
$300.
No, that's
Oh, is that all it is?
That's what I
Been
mentioned.
until now.
It's 49,
But that's all the hydrants from, so the rental for a new hydrant from memory is $895. So we're gonna not pay for that in one trimester and pay for it in 2.
Right.
you'd be,
Yeah, and but it's worthwhile, I mean, to your point, that's $300 a
yeah,
month.
Okay, so the next series of line items are police department. And,
they always end up back here, I don't know why they. Yeah, that's right. The policemen have the donuts.
Not in the budget.
Hold on.
You want to breakdown? You said clown.
that's what you sent me, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's universality of that phrase.
I'm gonna wait for John to, so the next, under police, we have so let me just go through them briefly. Compensation, which is hourly rate and total, and you see there the others listed, which we can speak to. Some of these are easier than others, so why don't we skip around a little? Thanks so much. Or no, let's go back to it. Let's just do the compensation straight up. Michael, do you want to, what we've looked at here is, we know, we just had this long conversation in the last meeting. Where we approved a plan for 2019 for police coverage that is a job share arrangement between Michael Boucher and Ben Colco, with Michael as head of department. So that number is, I think it's on here, isn't it? Yeah, the old number is on here, 10,740. Steve, what was it, 11 something?
11,300.
Well, for this year?
Yeah.
11,556, I think.
Yeah, 11,556.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's
11,556.
7,500 was budgeted back in the day for 2019, and we've just changed it to 11.
11,556.
Yeah, 11,556. So that's the
Base compensation.
Yeah.
base compensation. Yeah. So we now this is Michael's analysis about what would be needed in 2020. Of course, it's open to discussion.
Absolutely.
So Michael, do you want to just briefly summarize that and with a specific focus on what we have, how the additional hours break down?
Yeah, and I'll start with saying what I've done here was institute what I would have liked to have done in 2019, but because of budget constraints and what we had for available money, I ended up not requesting that. I think the original I put out there was 12,918, and this is a little bit over that. So where you see the increases in hours really are in so the peak season time, I had up to 44-hour days to allow for 44-hour weeks to allow for some overages, but not go to the full 48, and allow for the potential of somebody coming in, namely Ben, who lives locally, to come in for a couple hours very randomly. I need to account for that. And then that total was an additional 70 hours onto the budget for a total of 412 hours. The ramping up period, instead of having weeks where we have the police officer come in and then they disappear, it just maintains. And then it ramps up at the same time of year as the previous one, which we have this year. So that was an additional 40 hours. And then the ramp down period actually only changed by 4 hours total. But with that total and the 500 court and paperwork, which is what was in the 2019 budget as well, the total was 13,836. And I don't suppose beyond reason, yearly changes, COLA, for lack of a better term, that would change, because I think that fulfills the objective of what the police department should be doing.
Lee?
I guess people know that I'm not really for this. My first question is, why do we need job share? This is a part-time police department. I see it as a foot in the door, trying to ever increase the police department with a police chief basically acting as a fellow who's going to be always trying to increase the budget, and I am not for this. We also have Sheriff's Patrol, we also have the state police. I am not for this. I see it as just a foot in the door that's always going to cost us more money, and I am dead set against it.
Michael?
I understand what you're saying, Lee, and maybe you should think about proposing something where we try to freeze whatever number we come up with now for a little bit, so that you can be assured that that doesn't expand beyond this. That's one option. I had a couple questions about the numbers here.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in these numbers, do we have sort of payroll taxes, or what other taxes are there, or?
You don't, there
They're
are no,
accounted somewhere.
those are not there.
They're not in there?
No.
So what roughly is that on top of it? I just to get an idea.
And it's accounted for
But
somewhere else.
it's, but it's
in the budget.
17%.
Seven, on top of these numbers,
Actually, no, yeah, probably 17% is a good number.
and that was already accounted for the 7,500. We didn't account for that for the extra this year, then this would not, that's not accounted for would it either, right, the 17%?
Kind of, sort of, maybe. The-
Yeah, that's what I'm asking, I don't understand.
The approved 11,556 includes, or was attempted to include, payroll taxes associated with the increase in wages for this year,
Oh, so-
being removed from contingency.
So it's apples and oranges then. This one includes that, this number 13,800 doesn't?
No, let me try that again.
Okay.
So you have two different numbers. That 11,556 is not a $5,000 increase over the $7,500 real budget.
Because it was.
It's a $4,000 increase, right?
Right,
Right.
There's another 1,000 that was approved by the overseers that I've dumped into payroll taxes.
I see, okay.
Now, that may not be exactly right. You can quibble with $300 there, put 700 somewhere else. But we're planning on withdrawing from contingency enough additional funds to support the pure wages of 11,556.
But that's 2019, but the 2020 number
will be wages only.
The number in front of you is wages only.
Okay.
So,
My preference would be that the number in front of me have the roll-ups as well.
That's what I'm getting at, because I
Well,
find that to be rough.
I can put a line in there to do that calculation, but why don't we just continue before you go?
Okay.
Because that's chump change compared to what we face it.
Right.
Okay, so, well, 17% is, you know, a lot. It's 1/5, almost 1/5. If the payroll rolls, well, the roll-ups equal 17% of wages, and so that's a lot of money.
I just think we should be looking at the actual costs in the future, and I agree with you, it's
In the,
it's
yeah,
not,
the
it's not
past,
gonna
we've
break.
always had the roll-ups at a different line in the budget,
Right.
which is where one of the reasons we were surprised by the safety cost for cops, police officers,
There you go.
last
I don't care
year.
that way.
So, I guess I'll put that concern aside, I guess since I have the floor, since I took the floor, I'll have a question. What does the chief do for 100 hours that is different from what an officer does?
It's, well,
And
there's,
let me just say, because my bias on that
right.
is with Lee.
Well, there's no, all I did there was to account for the hours that I'm going to be coming in and working regular shifts, so on and so forth. It's not that I'm doing any other different work. All the different work that comes into play actually comes into play during what we've seen this year during budgeting season and end of the year paperwork. I was just accounting for that I'm working $2,500 worth of hours, so 100 hours at my rate of pay. And then the officer is working 516 hours. And I was just separating between the two. Because I'm gonna be just as busy as I was last year, and I'm not gonna be sitting in my tiny office
It's
all the time.
calculation.
Okay, I just wanted to
Yeah,
make sure
that's
that's
all.
not.
No, no. I just wanted to separate the two.
Okay.
Further questions?
Have we moved down to training and breakdown?
Talk about that.
Yeah, but I don't know how you want to do this.
Well, let's talk about everything on the piece of paper first, and then we'll decide how we're gonna vote. So,
You
yes,
get all the way down.
Oh, JPMA mandatory is, what is JPMA mandatory?
So JPMA is a program that the state of Maine mandates that all law enforcement agencies have to use, and it's $75 per officer that you have. Since we have 2 officers, it's $150.
Okay, so my question is, both officers have other jobs, right?
We both do not work for another police department, no.
Oh, you don't?
No.
Oh, okay.
Nice try, though.
I thought you did.
No,
That's good to know. I thought you
They have other positions, but not with police departments.
Okay, that's
Right.
good. That's all I need to know.
So,
Anything else on training breakdown?
Any other questions?
Let's
So that-
move on to uniform and supplies breakdown. Questions there?
I have questions as that. I appreciate very much Michael working hard to get reality-based numbers in front of us, but if I look at training, et cetera, for the past, we've only spent about $150, we have $1,000. So is this mission creep as well?
So which one are we talking about now?
Well, I'm looking at the whole 1,025, there's uniforms, there's
Correct.
equipment, there's a radio. I noticed that we just approved something already on radio here.
Cruiser, in-car, and I will gladly go down through each one of these.
I think we need Bill here as well for that.
So the office is office supplies and what we would have this year, or next year, which was we need to buy certain office supplies and evidence collection, things that we actually don't possess and we aren't able to get. So I've tried to account for that in the $90. The public safety would be notices, so on, that would be printed and/or other items, potentially, I mean, as simple as buying a bike helmet for a kid. Just to account for that for the safety fair, which is something I just,
Okay, I don't want to buy bike helmets for the kids.
well, it was just,
We're a summer
it was a
community.
gift.
Well, for-
No, it was a, like, a giveaway gift type thing, and it was just an idea I had. But that's what that would be used for, that's kind of a general item. Uniform is $150, which I believe last year it was uniform and supplies just at $150. And then general equipment is $225, there's a reason for that. And the radio, that's because the current portable radios we have actually aren't powerful enough and aren't new enough to currently be fully compatible with what Waldo County Dispatch Center has. So it is what it is, and I'm trying to break out the expense, mainly because I'm looking on eBay and so on and so forth to try to find a very good used model, or luckily get one for free. And then the law books is an expense that we have every year, which is set by the company, which is $85. Now we have a computer, but on that computer, if we're gonna be online, it has criminal justice data on it. We just have to supply a firewall, and I'm not exactly sure how much that cost will be, so I put a $100 limit. And then the miscellaneous, which I'm completely willing to lose, is for any unknowns. And if we stay under that budget, which is my intention, once again, is that with this, it would actually be under the 1,025, never go over that limit. That's my full intention.
First Judy, then Mike. Ed or Steve? Steve, why don't you
Money
jump in?
first.
I would say strike office, we have a budget for office supplies.
That's fine.
Those are all
Okay.
flowing through. The public safety is sort of what I understand, a fun thing,
A what thing?
a fun thing.
No, it was just, so
Notices?
I'll go out and print notices, and I have in the past.
We have a budget within.
And if we have office supplies,
Right.
We have a budget in the general government,
That's
so I would
fine.
say strike that, that's probably a
that's fine.
duplication. And I'm unclear on equipment versus radio.
I think the radio, why I put the radio in there,
I got radio, what is equipment?
equipment is everything else we may need.
Like what?
Flashlights and,
Flashlights, like last year, we spent $50 on a flashlight. It's really kind of an unknown expense that I'm just trying to account for, so, and it's different than uniforms, because we'd be buying uniform items for individual officers, whereas equipment would be bought, owned, and listed as owned by the department, so it wouldn't go away once an officer left. That's the major difference.
So one of the things, this is a philosophical thing for the overseers to consider. I am not a fan of budgeting what-ifs. I budget for what you need, and then if we need something else, we do our best to figure out how to fund that. So to have you come in at $100 on equipment and budget $225 is not an approach that I particularly advocate. I would advocate if you need $100, tell us what it is, we'll put it in there, and if something comes up and you need another $50 or $100, we'll take it out of contingency. Because all we really do is pad the budget in multiple locations, and at some point, you end up raising taxes to cover the padding. So and miscellaneous things, there is no such thing as miscellaneous.
and the other side of that, right, is what is this computer maintenance? No, like, did you buy a computer?
No, we received a computer from the Hancock County Sheriff's Department.
Oh, great, so,
So
what about backing it up and things, is that included in here?
that's what I'm trying to get at.
That's the
that-
firewall thing you
So
talked
we have
about.
the firewall, so
Firewall is different than backing.
some, in some form of a hard drive, which we can buy for $50 and back up to that.
Right, so
the
you
data.
put it in the safe and.
Correct.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's probably a very realistic, hard number. I've never done this before, and this is one of the issues that I also have, is these items we've never accounted for, so the realistic cost is actually really hard to come by on some of these line items specifically.
Judy?
Steve said exactly what I was going to say, which is it sounds like some of this is wishful thinking as opposed to budgeting. If we took off the office, the public safety, because both of those are covered by other parts of our budget,
That's fine.
the equipment, which sounds like wishful thinking, and the miscellaneous, which we don't like to budget for, that reduces this 1,025 to 535.
And then I would suggest we raise it for the computer maintenance one, because getting a firewall, you're gonna have to pay a monthly fee for that, and then it will be more than $100 in buying a hard drive. It's just that's a normal cost or something like that.
So-
Firewalls don't need to be a monthly subscription.
The kind that they're talking about, I think, like.
Okay.
But I don't know for sure. But it's gonna be
resolve
more
that.
than $100 for that and a hard drive.
So the total between training breakdown and uniforms and supplies breakdown, if we even cut off these items, is in the $1,200–1,300 range.
Which one?
If we take off what has been suggested taking off out of uniforms and supplies, we're down to $535. If you add that on to training breakdown up above, 535 and 750.
Right.
You're at around $1,300.
There's different budget lines.
They're different budget lines. I'm just saying they're not compensation. I'm trying to deal with these before we get to the compensation. So, and a question I have is this to bring the police department in line with where it should be, and these are annual costs into the future, or do you think that these would perhaps decline over time because we've taken care of some of these items?
Some of these items are annual, and some of these items are not annual. So all I was trying to do, honestly, with the equipment side, was to say, if we had an overage in the price of the radio that we need to get,
Okay.
that we would then dip into that line and use it for the radio. Because realistically, the radio, which I priced out, which would work, is right around $400.
And the training at 750?
And the training costs are, honestly, that's fairly accurate, because if we have to go to an academy sponsored training, which we're required to take academy trainings on top of the other mandatory training, we have to pay a fee to go.
So we've gone from, but training line is going from $24 to $150 to $750, and it's going to stay at $750 as far as you can tell.
I think that's a very realistic number.
Okay.
I honestly do.
I
For two
think,
officers.
but for the other one, the uniform and the supplies, there's gonna be something else next year that's gonna replace whatever we bought this year, so.
Judy?
Well, I want to say what you just said, which is you've priced out a realistic radio for 400, and yet you're presenting to us a number for 200. I want to have a real number.
My wishful thinking with that is that when we go, say January 1st, 2020, when we have access to this money, that I'll be able to watch and find one for less and save the village money. And if I'm unable to do that, I also have another resource where I can go and use those funds, a combination of those two funds, to purchase that equipment. That's what I was thinking with there, because the actual hard number on the radio would be looking for from a retailer would be $750, probably $750. So, and I'm trying not to incur that cost. I mean honestly.
So,
Jeffrey?
Well, no, you really.
I'm just arguing.
Well, I guess I don't have as much a question as I have a comment, and I think this is a philosophical thing. And the philosophical thing is, what do we want these presents to look like? What we've said, police officer Mike, is assuming for this year and what you would envision for next year, what are kind of the support things that go into that? And these are the support things that he's come back to us and said, this, if you're going to have a police department and you're going to have 2 police officers, these are the things you need. I think as overseers, we've got to tackle the philosophical question. And the philosophical question is, as overseers and with the support and recommendations from our safety committee, is what do we want the police presence to look like? Because that's kind of what drives it.
Right. And we last month basically said we want it to look like approximately 40 hours a week during the season. And all of this rolls that snowball down the hill, because we've already said that's what our citizens seem to want from us, is a police presence in the season.
Mike?
I think this is great. I mean, this is exactly what we asked you to do, is tell us what it's really gonna cost, and that's what it is. And then I think it gets back to what Jeff says. Now that we know what it costs, it's not like we can go through this and shave this and that much. It's gonna cost something like this if this is the road we wanna go down. Is that what you're saying, Jeff?
Yes.
Lee?
Is that what you want? You want an ever-increasing police force. Now we got 2 officers. It's gonna cost us more every year. It's gonna cost the taxpayer more every year. There are people in this community, on my end of Bayside, that are living on fixed incomes. They can't afford increasing taxes every year. And that's why I've been staying on the board, because I've been trying to fight this ever-increasing, and I consider the police department, when you went to job sharing, it's gonna go the same direction.
Judy?
So what we have to remember is that this is the budget that we would present to the villagers at their annual meeting in August, and the question posed to them is, look at the line for police. Notice it's a lot higher than it was last year. There's two reasons for that. We're being much better about telling you what the actual cost has always been, and this is what it costs for what you asked for. People at your end have said they're scared to sit on their porch unless we have 40-hour-a-week presence. So the test will be when the villagers vote for this, because they can always vote down, they can reduce any budget. Every year, Timmy reminds them, you don't have to accept this budget. You can vote down, you can't vote up. This is what the reality of the benefits you receive costs. Do you want to pay for it? This is a reality-based question that you and I aren't going to answer today. My personal view is, I've said it before, I wish to God Al Keith and Bill Sr. were still our constables. That's the world I want to live in. That's not the world that exists.
Mike?
It is the safety committee's intent that once this new budget is sort of established, that then the goal is just sort of cost of living increases beyond that, because I think that needs to be part of the discussion too, is that I do worry about, the creep of, well, maybe we should have one more officer for flexibility than we have all more uniforms and everything else. And it's not even more time, it's just more cost. So if that's the intent, I'd love to hear what your discussions have been on.
Yeah, we had a 2-hour meeting this week. I think most safety committee members see this as, this is what it costs to do it right. Now, if you drill down into that, does that assume that we'll come here every year and say, oh, we have news, it's even more this year by some order of magnitude? I would argue no. I also think that, we can say, the biggest thing here is compensation, right? We can pick away at radios and whatever, and I think that's smart. But the biggest one is compensation. Do you want to go to more hours, basically, and how the hours break down? That's what we should be talking about, because the philosophical stuff's important. Let's not get stuck on the blades of grass when we have a forest of trees called compensation. And I prefer, because I have to say, we didn't take a vote, we had a consensus, yeah? And then I said, let's have Michael come and have this conversation at this level. Personally, I think that, and I'm not trying to influence anyone, but I think you could look at something like this conversation about, should we look at what's working this year as projected and try that next year or some goal. It doesn't have to necessarily be this number. So I don't want to, and let me speak to the job share thing for a minute. I understand what you're saying, Lee, about once you have 2, you got to support 2. Okay, but that's not as much as I think it sounds like. Bottom line is, remember, we went to 2 in a job share arrangement because we weren't going to be able to have 1 like we had last year. So it was a practical, it wasn't about let's have 2 and we get a little, I know calling it a police department can get people triggered. It's still Bayside, it's still the expectation that's the seasonal coverage. But I'll tell you, we have 2 new members on the board, on the committee. They are mothers of young children who I've asked to join. They're terrific. They sit up on their porch and they're dealing with cars rumbling down the street and the speeding problem. So, safety committee in the past, when we dealt with that, it's always in response. It's always mid-season. July and August, we're responding to meetings where we have people irate because their kids are at risk, and they're wise to be thinking that. And we have very little means and very little things we can do for it. So this is, again, but to your point, are we going to come in every year and say, now, guess what, we want 4 cops? No, probably not. I would say no. I think that's crazy. But it is the philosophical piece is important, and it does have ramifications. And I would imagine at the town meeting, I would look forward to a healthy conversation about it, because it sounds like it's a conversation that's long overdue. When people default back to, well, I remember when we didn't, and I remember that summer we didn't have to, but it's a different ballgame when you have when you're sitting on your porch and you're worried about there's a dump truck that rolls through here every day at the same time, every day apparently, and he's speeding like a, you know, and so, I mean, come on, let's be real. We can, you know, the comment earlier too, which is interesting to me about the basketball safety berm, what was it called? A
Solution.
Safety is solution. You pay for lifeguards because you're paying for something, hoping something else doesn't happen, right? So I mean, it's a little different. I know when you look at it as a budget item and say, well, can we speak specifically to, do we need this? Well, it's, again, I think we do, the safety committee does. Whether or not we need it at this level, though, is, I think, the compensation piece is I think, I would prefer if we could focus there.
Late, I would be much more supportive if we didn't have this ramp up and ramp down, and we just had the police when we needed them during the peak season, when most of the people are here.
Is it your intent that the overseers take an action today?
Well, no, this is the budget workshop.
I understand. Is there any action you're looking for from the overseers?
Well, as I prefaced earlier, I've never been through this before, so I don't know if this process is an approval process for us to then forward on for the warrant or what. I mean, I'm looking for your guidance.
Well, so I think this is very well done. I appreciate all the energy that you and the safety committee put into it. You know, we've never taken this level of detail to get to where we are. I would caution against getting into a discussion during the annual meeting on line items in the safety budget, because it will never end, it will never come close.
Yeah, no, I was not.
So I think one of the things that we should try to do is come to consensus where the overseers as a group can largely support whatever it is we're doing, and say this is a lot of money, but we recognize it. I think some history might be helpful. If you go back to police compensation, in 2017 we spent $1,000. And that was because we couldn't find police officers. Do you remember our Capitol policeman that we had?
Yeah, it was awful.
Yeah, absolutely horrible. So part of the problem was that for many years, we had a budget of about $4,000 or $5,000 that was driven by two very ineffective police officers. Worked 40 hours a week, that's just what the village did. They hung up on Route 1, we had no police coverage in the village. Last year was the first year, my choice of words, where we had a legitimate police coverage in the village. And I personally support that and think it makes a lot of sense. I would remind everybody that the dollars you're looking at have increased by 35% based upon what it costs us to hire a police officer. We used to pay $17 an hour, we couldn't find anybody. That's why we spent $1,000, because there was no one who would come to work for us. So even if you don't change the number of hours, we're going to see a 35% increase in the cost of police compensation. That's a done deal. So I can depress you with all kinds of numbers, but I mean, that's part of the reality. I think the whole budget is going to end up being relatively high, and I'll give you sort of a preview of where we stand. The police budget only, if accepted basically as proposed today, assuming that we're going to account for the 11,556 as being the correct budget number, is a 25% increase in budgeted police funds. I can look at a lot of it and say,
That's
you
not
know,
including 2020, is it? Or is it
that would be the 2020 budget.
2020?
That would be a 25% increase.
Moving from the 11 to,
Right.
or from the 7?
Moving from the 11. Okay, and that's police only. So, and just some highlights, gas for cruiser went up. I mean, that's just what it is. The budget this year is 300, that was probably too low. Cruiser maintenance, I plugged in 350 just to have a number. We've put in 200, that's proven not to be sufficient. Training is extraordinarily high compared to anything we've ever spent. We've spent the maximum of 150, it's 750. And I'm going to accept that as a necessary number. So you put it in there and you live with it. Uniforms and supplies, geez, you know, I understand, Michael, that you're kind of bringing us to where we need to be, but we've never paid for law books and things like that. But at any rate, I can accept that number as well. Bottom line is, if people want the police coverage as proposed, there's a cost in doing so. And that's not for me to decide at all. That's for the overseers to decide, that's for the safety committee to decide what they can afford to do. The next piece is I want to go back to the things you can't control, which are street lights, which will go up 5%. That's just going to be what it is. That will continue going up every year no matter what we do. The total protection and safety budget goes up by 16%, assuming the 11,556 wage that we agreed to. The only part in here that troubles me, just from a process standpoint, is that we haven't applied the same level of due diligence to lifeguards that we did to police. And I think it would make sense for the safety committee to go back and look at what they want for coverage, put hours and wages to it. That number will come down from 8,400. I don't know what it will come down to, but that 8,400 was just we spent money because we had it and nobody looked at it. That doesn't represent what we did for lifeguard covers last year, or what we needed for lifeguard covers last year. That was just done because we extended the amount of hours they had available, and let them work 8-hour days when there was no need. So I think that number can come down a little bit.
So for today's purposes, because what this is we're workshopping what we will be putting into the warrant, I would feel more comfortable keeping the 8,400 in there, knowing that we can peel that back.
Yeah.
I also don't feel comfortable, but think that it's the reality. This is a reality-based number. We decided last time that 11,556 was a reality-based number. So we need to come to this line here on the budget. I would take those incidentals down to 535, because that's what, to the under uniforms and supplies breakdown.
Right.
I'd bring that down to 535, because many of those things are somewhere else in the budget.
Right, and then those were, I agree with the supplies and the other.
Right, but I think for now, for what we're trying to do today is do a piecemeal budget workshop on this. We stick those numbers in, we should have a better sense as to the lifeguard piece of the puzzle. Maybe that'll bring it down a little bit when we actually approve the warrant.
Yeah, I think having that to look at is fine. The other thing that's sort of a curious number is if you look at this year's budget at $7,500, what the proposal for 2020 is only $5,800 more than this year. We've already approved 5,000 rather.
You mean to
So,
11,500?
In 2020,
Yes.
it will go up to $5,800 over this year's budget, which we already know we've changed. So you're really talking about $800 more.
Right,
Yeah.
right, we've already approved.
That's providing if you go to 13.8.
Right.
For 13.6, yeah.
So, since the next meeting of this board is in 2 weeks, does the safety committee want to take in, sort of bring back a cleaner version perhaps, a revised version?
I don't
Do you
think so.
need it? You don't need it?
No, we have to do
Done
infrastructure
what
next.
you've done here?
The one thing I would do is go back and follow the lifeguard and make sure it's what you want.
Yeah, I know,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, you're gonna be spending the same amount of time testing Mike's numbers on the infrastructure the next time.
Yeah.
And Mike's not gonna be here, so we
Good
will
call.
have a,
I offered to change it.
No, this is just
This
safety.
is so we don't do all of this and spend the night trying to get it.
Right, and Michael, I really appreciate your doing this at this meeting, because this has not occurred before, I believe, where the safety committee has said, line by line, here's what we're proposing.
Right, I didn't want to come in and do a curtain drop, I'd rather have it be.
Thank you.
But the question I have, I got a little lost there on the compensation. The number you're plugging in,
So what I did is I plugged in 11,556, which is what we have approved to spend this year, basically. That's a $1,700 increase. If you increase to 13,000 and change next year, it's a $1,700 increase.
and that's, I mean, you know, right, because if you look at, as we have discussed, the actual number in 2018 was 10.7. Yeah, so.
right.
All right.
I just,
Mike?
one last thing is, I know, Judy, you've talked a lot about, we always want to try to get consensus here. And I think that these numbers are getting up pretty high. And for me to support this, I think I would love for the safety committee to come up with some way that they could potentially freeze it for another year. Now, whether that's total number of hours, you don't think you'll go above the existing number, or the total dollars, or something, just so when we go to the annual meeting, we say, we're not gonna go above this for the year after that too. We're gonna see how this goes, we're gonna adjust with the dollars we have, but we're not gonna go above that again, so we're not gonna come back every year for this huge rate increase. That would be a way that I could support it, so I'm just saying that.
May I make
Good.
one comment?
Please.
Just real quick, I do agree with that. And the objective with that was to give a realistic number that only really would ever have the COLA increases. And we could keep it maintained. I personally don't believe that we're going to ever keep asking for these large increases. This is really a one-time deal.
Also, this ramp up and ramp down, as I recall in the conversation,
Yep.
this is the year we're trying it to see what it's like. The intent would be, it may be that these hours of 112 and 92 are not the accurate hours. We'll find out after it happens.
Yeah.
Anything else from Safety Committee?
Yeah, a couple things. Have we covered, Bill, I'm still not clear where the defibrillator falls and where you get to have some conversation.
It goes into equipment maintenance.
Okay, but we're covered there, Bill, yeah? I mean, I just want to make sure, because that was a major concern.
Well, it was a $750 budget proposed for equipment maintenance.
Yeah.
And I guess you replace a battery periodically?
No, it's not, no, you have to replace,
Okay.
blades,
Yeah.
the pads and stuff, they have expiration dates for the kids, the infants, and the,
Okay, and then one other thing I had,
Do you know what that costs?
not without pulling out
You
stuff.
have to replace them every year?
Yeah, it's just like any medical thing, it has an expiration date.
yeah.
They're not
Yeah,
cheap.
and one last thing that may or may not be relevant here is the committee, and I'm sure this is dead on arrival, but maybe we can explore it. The committee would like to purchase another one of those move-around seats. Talked about, we have one. And I think, what's the number, Bill, on that?
I thought we paid last time $2,500.
Something around that, a little over that, 24.
24. So I don't know where that can be handled. I mean, if we create it, was not in the safety committee budget, maybe put it in land, but, wait, I missed that, what?
I have to answer it.
It's, we called a tree, I think there's money sitting right now in the tree budget.
I just put that in uniforms and supplies. We can create as many budget lines as you want, but at some point it's pointless.
Yeah.
Unless you're gonna use that information on a regular basis to make your decisions, there's no point in reporting.
But what I'm asking, I guess, is, does it go in, and that's a second sign? And, you know, do we have the appetite to approve that?
I wouldn't want to buy another one of those signs until we had some data that the one sign we have is influencing our decisions as to what the police officers are doing. That's my point of view.
Oh.
Anything else?
That's it.
So if I can just provide a little bit of a, so this is wonderful, as I said. Last year when we got to the budget meeting and I said the total village budget is going to increase by 17%. Everything that everybody had done kind of went by the wayside because the overseers could not foresee approving a 17% budget increase. Right now, for protection and safety, we're at 16.4% increase. Now, I don't have any idea what the rest of the village looks like. You can rest assured that our total budget is probably going to be an excess of 10% increase, and that's before we do anything at all about the seawall, which is going to require a bond to the best of my knowledge. Before we do anything, if the overseers decide to support the utilities request, that any aesthetic changes because of this dechlorination process take place, be funded by the village. So I think you're going to be looking at a budget that has significant increases above and beyond what we're looking at with our basic operating budget. Just kind of a preview of coming attractions, no judgment.
And just because I knew again, the process is that when we're done per committee, we have a budget meeting where we have that conversation and then we do a dial back based on that.
Correct.
And all that wishbone.
All right.
And you'll have that information in advance.
Right. Dial back is the right term to use there. Right?
I have a question of the safety committee, and it's to follow up on Mike's comments that it might make sense during the games, the July 4th games in particular, that we affirmatively shut down the center road. And I personally think that that is a wise idea, but I would suggest we do it on the evening of the band and the day of the games, the children's games. I'm not sure if the children's games and the safety committee, safety day is the same day?
No, it's not.
Okay, but I would support a proposition that we close the road for a set period of time, and we have authority to do that.
So actually, we were gonna talk about that after, what the logistics of that would be, and then we'll come back and explain.
Okay.
Excellent. Waterfront Safety Committee.
After the safety committee exhausted everything.
That's what, well, see why I don't like to go last? This is why we'll just agree to everything
shifting's everyone that can shift.
I know, the order is a mystery to me.
See why I was short?
Yeah, exactly, thank you. So, as you'll recall, the Waterfront Safety Committee was really appointed to look at the issue and manage the issue of congestion with watercraft on village-owned property, particularly the water flow and the outlet flow. And really to look at it from a safety perspective. So we've done a couple of things. Last month, we came to this group and asked you to ratify the rules, which you've done. We asked you to approve a voluntary registration process, which you've done. As a committee, we're now looking at how do we get that information out to the broader community. There will be an article in the Spring Telltale, which we've written, and Dan Webster is editing. We're very good at it. We're going to have something in BaysideMaine.com. We're going to post the ratified rules at the dock, the village office, the fire station. We're going to have copies of them at the Yacht Club kickoff in May. So we're looking to start pushing that information out. In terms of the voluntary registration process, we're trying really hard not to use the P word for permit, so we're just saying registration process. We're looking at decals that we would use and a registration form that will be available in a variety of locations that people can fill out with appropriate information, and then stating that they have received the rules and they agree to abide by the rules. So we can start to connect voluntarily registering your watercraft with the rules. So, but in the overarching spirit of safety, one of the things we've spent time talking about is the congestion at the wharf dock, and there are just too many dinghies. So how do we approach getting some of those dinghies out to the outer flow? And, you know, in redefining the definition of a dinghy, we've done some of that. In the rules, you're not going to use your dinghy, move it to your own boat or to the outflow. But an issue that always comes up with the current outflow is it's where the 420s live. Remember, that's primarily owned by the Yacht Club. It's where they keep their 420s. And there's a safety issue with that, because suddenly you're putting your dinghy out there and you've got to climb on top of and over and around. So early on, the concept of trading out that float that has the 420s on it with possibly a float that belongs to the town that is down at Saturday Cove, that idea surfaced. So to take the 420 float, put it someplace else, put that float in its place, that has an open deck, it's a little bit bigger theoretically so it can handle additional dinghies safely. As a committee, we said, boy, wouldn't it be great if we could get the town to just give it to us? And we, as committees like to do, we gave that assignment to Billy Page and said, can you go to the town and just have them give it to us? Well, he did. And they have agreed to give it to us. The committee, the Waterfront Safety Committee, is recommending, they would like a motion to codify that we will accept that the transfer of that float from the town. We would also like to approve up to $1,000 for minor modifications that will be necessary to allow us to effectively and efficiently use it this year.
Well, I make the first motion to accept the Trojan horse, the free float.
Second, any discussion? Steve?
I hate to be the bearer of bad news. So you've got to get the float here. What's that cost and where does that money come from?
Gordon will do
So look to the wharf
We
master.
have it under control.
Thank you, Dick.
Yeah. Corey, do you want to talk to that?
Timing is rather key because tomorrow the floats go in at Saturday Cove. Proc Marine will be on site. For $135 an hour, the best option is, frankly, to have them pick it up and put it on their truck and bring it up here, and they've agreed to do that. So it can't take more than a couple of hours, so.
Does that include the 1,000? Is that part of this 1,000 that we're talking
That
about?
I'm not sure how we factored that in, but
Yeah.
the second option would be to leave it there and it's some other later date. The town is against dragging the floats up the new facility down there. I think a Yankee Ingenuity group could get together and maybe roll it in, perhaps, we probably could, but honestly, if you agree, you think it's a good idea, you want to take it, it makes sense to get it up here, because then to do the modifications to it and that type of thing.
Yeah, my only point is there's money associated with that.
Well, that's-
Yeah, it could be,
That's part
not
of it.
tomorrow,
Part of it.
yes.
So let's go to chapter 2, moorings.
Yes.
Gonna go on.
Yeah, it's go on the, it'll go on the
It is gonna
second
need
warning,
those.
yeah.
It's gonna be that.
So what's gonna happen with the mooring for the 420 float you're gonna move?
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
so
yacht
let's,
club.
why don't we clarify that a bit, Jeff? That's what I was gonna do before you jumped into.
So the idea is the yacht club will take responsibility for the 420 float. And it will be their responsibility to moor it, to take it in, to put it out, and do all that. So the village will go from having 3 floats to having 3 floats.
But, and you and I already talked about this, the yacht club has not had a meeting to discuss that matter, but I do believe what he's saying is correct.
My only point is that.
There's money.
Well, it's money, okay, so I'm gonna assume that the moorings that are on the current 420 float are sufficient for the new float you're proposing to bring in, okay? And that therefore, if the yacht club is doing everything with the 420 float, there's no additional cost to the village,
That's the plan.
which is hunky-dory. However, I don't believe the yacht club's gonna pull a 420 float up into the park.
You know, but we're gonna, if it goes to the yacht, it's gonna tag along with what happens in the fall here.
So what we basically came up with, Billy and I, looking at numbers, is that it's probably something in the range of $1,000, $1,500 a year ad infinitum to support this additional float, which is gonna be a village expense.
Well, but
Not necessarily,
No.
not necessarily. The yacht club could take possession of the 420 float, the bad boy float, and put into their own budget the cost of
So-
pulling it out,
So far,
presumably at the same time that the others.
the yacht club has not made that decision.
Right.
They could do a lot of things. So far, right now, that's not the case.
But we leave it in the park.
well, I would say if they're not willing to do that, we just, the 420 float doesn't get used.
Right.
Fine, Lee?
I look for the permitting process to eventually pay for this.
And that's a good, so this year, from the standpoint of the permitting process, we're trying to, just to get everyone accustomed to it, we're making it voluntary, we're making it free, we're making it very user-friendly, but the idea is, and we're suggesting or encouraging a $5 donation to help, defray the cost. But the notion is, at some point, there's going to be a different kind of registration fee that will help generate some additional revenue to pay for some of these things. But I mean, if the yacht club has its board meetings and says, no, we're not paying for anything, well,
I'm not gonna say that.
I don't think they're gonna say that, because.
No, I don't either.
But I think the answer is that it sits in the shore and we sell it or something.
Yeah, we get rid of it.
Because right now, what I learned in the, I'm sorry to jump in, Judy, but
No,
just-
that's
What I learned in the Waterfront Safety Committee is that there are different ideas about that 420 float. The yacht club kind of thinks of it as their float, the village thinks of it as our overflow float, and the reality is it was bought by both, and it's kind of been shared. And one of the things we wanted to do here was kind of separate things. And this is one way to do it, is the new float will be the village float, the other float will be the yacht club. What they do with that is And I say them, it's me too, but.
Well, yeah.
Wait 1 second, guys, it's getting up. Judy?
That's what I was going to say, my
Yeah.
memory, and thank you for at least reinforcing my memory, I'm sure minutes will reinforce this, that is a co-owned
Correct.
float. So we would cede title to
Yes.
that float, we give them a bill of sale for our interest in that float. We would take this larger float that we're gonna get for free, I called it a Trojan horse for a reason, because of these additional costs that would impose upon us, which are no different than the cost we have now, other than tomorrow's costs, because we're getting rid of one float that costs us money, and we're gonna have another float that costs us essentially the same amount of money each year. At that point, we give them something that they like. They put a little sign on it that says for yacht club members only, and then they pay for putting it in and putting it out, their own mooring. Presumably, we're all members, we all pay our membership fee, and that's what that would go for. I think that, given this clarification, I support the motion not only to accept the gift of the boat float from the town, but also will support the next motion to spend up to $1,000 to get it here and connect it in the way we need to for this year.
Lee?
I agree with Judy, and I think long-term, this permitting process is gonna pay for this.
Right.
And I think we ought to keep that in mind, whatever we do. The reason for permitting in other localities like Rockland, they charge $100
Right.
a dinghy,
Right.
period. How many dinghies we got here?
That's what we're trying to get our arms around.
Vicky?
Well, and with the motion, with the contingency that the other is ceded to and they take care of all the
Right,
expenses.
we're giving up
Yeah,
something that we have an
we're no longer-
interest in, so we're recognizing that our friends and neighbors who are in the yacht club are now going to have a cost that we have borne in the past. On the other hand, the 420s will be there. Yacht club members can keep their dinghies there or not, however the rules are that the yacht club does, and that should free up some space on our bad boy.
Well, and remember, the whole reason this committee came together and got its name, not to be confused with the safety committee, is because of safety. And we cannot be saying to people, don't put your dinghy on the wharf float, put it out on the outer float when it's not safe to use the outer float. We just can't do that. So, that's not an option.
And part of that, no, is for a ladder, right?
Okay, Mike?
I do want clarification. Yeah. It is very nice that they're giving it to us for free, but probably one of the reasons they're giving it to us is because they bought it with grant money. So, if they're not going to use it, they would, in theory, have to do something about compensation when you take grant money. They want a grant for another float down the road. So saying that it's still being used, I think, helps serve their purpose. And so just let's keep that in mind, because if it was bought by grant money, us using it for the village is actually along its intended purposes. We wouldn't want to share it with the yacht club because it was something that was bought with grant money.
If there is a motion, I believe, which is to accept the float from the town, that's the first motion?
That's the first motion.
Is there further discussion on that? Hearing none. All in favor? And that's unanimous.
Now I make a motion that we expend up to $1,000 to transport the float here and modify it so that it is suitable for the moorings that we have, that the village already owns.
And for safe use.
And for safe use.
Second it.
Okay, now I have a question.
Yes.
Does that include our $300 on our ladder? We're not gonna put a ladder on the boat we're now giving to the yacht club,
Correct.
right? So
Yeah.
that 1,000 includes that 300 that we've already approved?
The 300 approved was for the outflow, so
Yeah.
this now becomes the
Okay, so now it's 700. See how I save money?
Perhaps.
No, the 300.
You double counted that $300.
Yeah, you can't, because we're already spending this.
Okay, so it's
Sorry,
1,300.
1,300, but we've already approved 300.
Three has been approved. Further discussion on the $1,000 expenditure? Hearing none. All in favor? And that's unanimous too.
Now I have one more motion then. I move that the Northport Village Corporation present a bill of sale to the Northport Yacht Club for any and all interest it has in the outfloat.
Second.
Steve?
The yacht club paid for that in full and donated it to the village.
No.
No.
Yeah, I was there.
I have records that say otherwise. It was $8,000, and $600 came from the yacht club, $2,000 from the village corporation. I researched it, Steve.
Interesting. Well, regardless, we're giving it back.
Right, that's what I say.
Yeah. All right, okay.
If we own it in full, then if we pay for it.
Further discussion on this motion?
Any and all interest. Just
Any
say
and all
interest.
Yeah, whether we
We're
pay
done.
for it or not.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? That's unanimous too. Thank you.
Excellent.
Anything
All right.
else? Jeffrey?
Not done.
Just very quick related, because again, timing. So on my hearing, I'm going to be there tomorrow overseeing that operation, and I've already given them a heads up. So can I authorize them to put it on the flatbed and bring it up?
Yeah.
You and
Put
Jeffrey
it
figure out.
Yes.
wherever Billy wants it, and then they'll bill us, the village corporation, is that correct?
Steve will want you to make sure that they bill back $135 an hour that you told us, and then the warrant will be approved at the next meeting, which would be May 12th, if they present the bill by then. They're not presented by then.
Correct.
We won't
Thank
expedite.
you, Gordon, very much.
Yeah, it's a big team.
This is good. It feels like, I like this movement around. Anything else, Jeffrey?
Nope. That's
Thank
enough
you.
for today.
Any town of Northport issues?
Yes, I'm so sorry, okay? But there is some really interesting information. First of all, town elections, June 1st, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. You may want to be there because at the last meeting, there was a young man who wants to buy some property and build a grow house in Northport. So Northport is, I don't know all the ins and outs, I don't know all the rules,
Marijuana.
I don't smoke marijuana, that's on camera. Okay, but they're going to have a non-binding, shush,
Come on.
shush. Did agree to put out a non-binding referendum, I think is the word, to see where the town is. The couple elections, things they've had have sort of been split almost half and half. And so, and the state is, I guess, sort of coming up with more rules about recreational marijuana. So anyway, there is going to be a referendum there, non-binding, at that town election. When you go to vote, I guess there's a new selectman to vote for too, I don't know about that. Okay, the Northport Town Meeting, a big one at Drinkwater School, June 3rd. I think they said 7 p.m. You can check that. So the thing that we were really interested in was the transfer station and what was going on there. They accepted a bid from Pine Tree, which was the current transfer station contractor, to handle the municipal solid waste. The problem was municipal solid waste had to be separated from recycling because the cost of recycling has become astronomical. And so they separated the two bids. They accepted the Pine Tree, so nothing changes there. The recycling, the other people that bid, and Pine Tree was one of them. It was really very educational. They were charging for the containers. They were charging for transportation of the containers to and from wherever they take your recycling to, and some other incidental expenses. The most reasonable bid was a company, DM&J, and they provided containers and all of that stuff. So it worked out really well, and actually less expensive than handling both municipal waste and recycling cost last year, I think is what was the final thing. So pretty much the same. Okay, the key though, which I thought was really interesting, and this is, somewhat anecdotal, is recycling. The big thing in recycling now is clean recycling. And they want, it was stressed, in order to make this work, if we can do our due diligence as homeowners and people that generate lots of trash and have lots of guests, to make sure that everybody understands clean recycling. And then I guess the biggest thing right now, I just heard this from Amy Eldridge yesterday, was people putting their recycling in plastic bags. Okay, so for all of us, I have some DM&J information about what you can put in your recycling, and I would propose that we put it on the Bayside website. Our communications officer gets involved. I think we should post it on the bulletin boards. give it to the young woman who runs Bayside Rentals now. And again, just emphasize.
If you give me 300 of these, I'll put one in every cottage.
Okay, I think, well, that's.
I'll just-
knock first.
I may not even knock, I'll just put, every cottage should have one.
Exactly.
Let's just do it that way.
Exactly. Well, what I asked for was, I asked Amy to check with DM&J to see if they had something or could put together a blurb, or I guess I could do it, that explains what clean recycling is and why it's important. And, you know, clean recycling doesn't mean you necessarily have to clean your glass bottle, you know, but you don't want to leave, you know, a film of mayonnaise in it maybe, but you want to rinse it out, that kind of thing. So, and the backside, if it's not clean, and they've determined that there's enough stuff in the recycling material that's not clean, they take it to incinerate it, which, again, you know, isn't doing so much, yeah, you're losing your positive effect. So, and I have a few little refrigerator magnets. If you want one, take one, whatever, and pass on to your friends or whoever wants one. Anyway, I picked those up from the town office. My fantasy is they only had a few of them. I didn't want to take all of them. My fantasy is they've probably got a box of 1,000 back there in a closet somewhere. But I'll check on that. Okay. Anything about that?
Judy?
So for our street side recycling, emphasizing that it needs to be clean recycling. For our purposes, it's still pick up on Monday in the paper bags.
Yep, it hasn't changed.
Great.
Yep, they'll take it from the guy who picks our stuff up. And they're all gonna have, apparently DM&J is gonna make sure these notices are up at the transfer station also. So, the bottom line is, after I've said all this, is nothing's changed. Except the players, some of the players that we never even see.
I'm confused. I see a note here underlined that says, do not bag your recycling. Where you just pile it in a loose pile?
No, I think they mean don't, don't use plastic bags, you use the big brown paper bags.
I don't bag except paper. See, it
This
says
is
except
because
paper.
of the bins. And most of what they're dealing with is people who have the bins but we have the paper bags, so they're okay.
And one of the discussions was they weren't even going to accept paper bags, but B&M&J, the guy says, yes, they'll accept the paper.
So maybe 300 of these, but I'm saying, let's just put something in it. I know there's some old stuff that's sitting around refrigerators around here and there, but it's time to refresh it clearly and remind people, so.
You know, I do this at work and I'm not supposed to, your tax dollars at work. All right, so I have to do it when nobody's looking.
That's how
turn
we
that
do
off. Oh my God. Anyway. Okay, and that is it. The marijuana, the vote, the town office. Oh, jeez.
But you took them from the office.
You got 3.
That's not 300.
Oh,
That's
there's more in there, I think.
30.
I'll
I'll start. I'll do Clinton at least.
Okay, since the next is, I'm done with the town. Any questions? I have a couple other things that, can I just start under comments of meetings and attendees?
As long as you keep it brief.
Okay, springtime's coming, lots of dogs last year. I put together some of these all nicely and colorful, and I was hoping you'd approve that we can go around and put these on the bulletin boards.
Do it.
Is that good? Okay.
You need more, we have 6 or 7 of them.
Yeah, I got more, I can do more.
You can do those at work, right?
It wasn't, yeah.
The
it wasn't-
laminating is great.
It wasn't as, yeah, the laminating is good, and the color, I like the color. I got some input from a village resident, and it goes back to something we've touched on before about feeling that there's a necessity to have an official Northport Village Corp website for the minutes of the meetings and stuff like that. They didn't like waiting a month to see the minutes, and they didn't feel like watching a filmed meeting for 3 hours. And why wasn't there a website that was just for Bayside government business?
So
We talk about that.
Yeah.
At 2 o'clock.
Oh, okay, great, okay, we'll pass on that. The other, but I missed the deadline, was once again, we were asked to write a letter about something that was going on with the Nordic salmon farms, aqua farms. And I passed the information on to John, thinking that we had time, but it was about a petition about land rights and usage under the water.
We don't need to write any letters. We have posted on BaysideMaine.com that our official position is that we are listening and we are aware of what's going on, and but we're not writing any letters right now.
Okay.
We're not in the business of that.
I think we're gonna talk, that'll come up peripherally at 2 o'clock, so
Yeah.
it'll be in and out of the other things we're talking about.
Does
So.
anyone have an appetite for starting at 1 o'clock?
I
You want to?
cool with
Yeah.
that. Anything else?
Oh, I was gonna go
No,
get
that's
pizzas
all
for
I have.
Brock and
Anything else from meeting attendees
Thank you.
here? Questions, issues? Thank you. Then, just a reminder, our next meeting is going to be on the 12th, and Vicky's going to run that. I'm fine with meeting, and I would love to meet at 1 o'clock if people are up for that. Let's go get some lunch and come back.
And we can do that in an hour, right?
And how long are we thinking this is going to go?
An hour.
I have an agenda, and we'll look at that, and we'll see how long it takes us. And if we're at the end of an hour, and there's still an appetite for continuing, we'll continue, and if people want to leave, they'll leave, we'll figure it out. Thank you, this meeting's adjourned. See you at 1.